Matthew Cox, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you.
And today, as my special guest co-host, is Jerri Williams. Welcome back, Jerri.
Thank you for having me back, especially to talk with Matt. So I'm excited.
Outstanding. You know what? Why don't you introduce yourself, Jerri? We'll go ladies first because we're all gentlemen here.
I'm Jerri Williams. I'm a retired FBI agent. I was in the FBI for 26 years, where I specialized in economic crime, your frauds, embezzlements, Ponzi schemes, advance fee schemes, mortgage fraud cases. But now I am the host of the FBI Retired Case File Review podcast and an author of 4 books based on the FBI nonfiction and crime fiction.
All right, Matt, we're going to find out all kinds of stuff about you as the podcast goes along. But I wanted to start out with, what does a retired FBI special agent, successful author and podcaster, public speaker and consultant, a retired Milwaukee police sergeant, author, podcaster, consultant, and a convicted felon guilty of multiple counts of bank fraud, ID theft, passport fraud, mortgage fraud, probation violation, is also a successful author, podcaster, and consultant. What do we all have in common? All that stuff. I just think it's an amazing time to be alive. What, maybe 10, 15 years ago, what we're doing right now probably wouldn't be possible.
No.
And now we're doing this, and I can't get, more excited about it. It's just a lot of people boo-hoo about, this, that, and the other thing, and they forget that it's a great, great time to be alive, I think.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
Pat, yeah, I know on your show you have lots of first responders and law enforcement people who talk about their books and their careers. Is this the first time that you've had a convicted felon on your show?
It is not. I had
Oh.
Frank Shamrock on the show. Frank,
do you know him, Matt?
Yeah, weird, right? A guy named O'Donnell having a guy named
Yeah,
Shamrock on his
I was
show.
gonna say.
But Frank is out in California. He caught 20 felonies before he was 20 years old.
Wow.
He grew up in a horrible, broken home, wound up at a boys' ranch, and one of his mentors actually adopted him. And his last name was Shamrock. That's where he came up with, that's why his last name is Shamrock. And his way out of the criminality was fighting. He became a UFC world champion. So he had an awesome story. He's such an interesting guy. He held every UFC MMA title for like 10 years. He's just such a deep thinker. I believe he either said, or I saw it somewhere else, that he's got a genius IQ, and you could tell from talking to him. It's just he had a horrible beginning in life and it snowballed, but he pulled his head off his ass and he's like, okay, I need to do something. He was married when he was 16 and he had a kid when he was 16. I mean, he spent time in prison, the whole 9 yards. So yeah, Matt, you're the second convicted felon on my show. Sorry, not to say you're not less or anything like that.
Well, we don't know. Matt could be a genius. What have you had your IQ done? Are you a genius, Matt?
I had 2 tests done because I have a learning disability. So I had 2 tests that were done when I was, I don't know, like 7 or 8 or 9 or something. And so like one was 140, one was like 141, and one was like 139 or something, and which
Pretty consistent.
didn't make sense because they were like, his vocabulary, he has a great vocabulary, he speaks well, he can't read, he can't write, something's wrong. His math skills are on par, but we've got to make, this is a problem. So eventually they came up with dyslexia, and I ended up in a special school. Well, several special schools till eventually I ended up at a school called Yates Academy. So
well, that's interesting because I think we're around the same age. I'm 59. Right. How old are you?
54.
Okay. Yeah, around the same ballpark.
I'm the old person here. I'm 66.
I was just gonna say I know better than to ask a woman
Oh,
what her
no,
age
no.
is. Okay. I've been scolded before publicly for doing that.
No, I'm proud that I've lasted this long. So
But my oldest son was diagnosed with dyslexia, and we're talking to the doctor that he had this like battery of tests, and his teacher, who's like, I think it was like first or second grade teacher, is like, yeah, we think he's got dyslexia, but we can't diagnose that. You have to take him to a doctor, and it's an all day thing, et cetera, et cetera. And they taught him, we got tutors and stuff, et cetera, and he flourished. He did fine, but we recognized what the problem was and we helped him. Whereas and I told him, I said, I can't read. I'm terrible. I'm super slow. I jumble all the numbers and letters. And he's like, it's hereditary. He said, you probably gave it to him. Like, sorry, didn't mean to do that, kid. But it makes total sense. When I was reading Matt's book, yeah, I was totally I was sympathizing, and I had a ton of empathy because I went through the same thing. They were going to put me in special ed classes,
Mhm.
and it's not that I had this disability, I guess is what you would call it. It was really holding me back, and teachers thought, well, he's just lazy, he's distracted, he's this, he's that, and nobody knew, and that's incredibly frustrating for a kid.
Yeah, I ran away from school until eventually they put me into, these special schools. That's what they call them then, special. I don't know
Yeah.
what they call them now, but yeah, I ran away several times. And what's so funny is that they, they didn't have room in the SLD classes. So that I ended up in like these special education classes. So I'm in there with kids that have like Tay-Sachs disease, and they've got major problems. Like these are, they've got Down syndrome, and these are the classes that I'm in. And I'm feeling like I'm not supposed to be here with these guys, And
Wow.
so I started running away. And then eventually my dad was like, yeah, we're gonna have to put him in a special school. So they
Wow.
put me in special schools that were so far away from the house I couldn't run away.
Well,
I'd never make it back to the house.
you wouldn't know how to get back. Yeah.
Well, for me, I went to Catholic grade school, and there's no running from nuns. You're in there,
Right.
man. You're not escaping nuns. I'm sorry. They're pretty hardcore. So, I kind of alluded to some of the crimes that you were guilty of, and you spent some time in prison. How many years were you in prison, Matt?
I always round up to 13, but it's like 12 and 10 months, 12 years, 10 months or something along those
Okay.
lines.
You were sentenced to 26, and we'll talk about how you kind of like chip that down a bit. But what are some examples of prison life? You hear, club fed, that kind of thing for a
Yeah.
federal prison. People are very curious about this.
I think so. My understanding of it was that initially, there was kind of a club fed type thing where they had, the low security, the lows, and the camps were very relaxed, and they had tons of privileges. But that was in the 90s. So Ronald Reagan kind of revamped the whole system in 86. They threw out federal parole, and they brought in sentencing guidelines and these super strict sentences, and so, but they also kind of upgraded the prison system. So in the 90s, it was great. Like you'd go into prison, it was like, gosh, you're just like, why even leave here? This is amazing. Assuming it's a low or a camp. The guards didn't wear guard uniforms. They wore like jackets, and they looked more like counselors or school counselors or something. They didn't call you inmate. It was always Mr. Cox, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Thomas, Mr.
Oh, so it wasn't like numbers on a uniform or anything like
No,
that.
and that changed, when they started arresting, when the crack epidemic happened, that kind of changed, because you weren't getting these white collar criminals or these high level drug dealers. And the big thing is that at some point, I want to say it was in the early 90s, might have been the late 80s, early 90s, Barbara Walters brought cameras into a camp and interviewed a bunch of the inmates and made a mockery of the system. And that was the episode, was like, I believe, was Club Fed.
Mm.
And so they were joking about, not joking, I mean, she did it like it was serious, but she's interviewing these inmates. And this is a problem with inmates in general. Or really criminals, probably. They're extremely entitled. So she's interviewing these guys, and some of them, as she's interviewing them, so, well, what do you get for for lunch, for this? Well, we used to get lobster. We don't get lobster as much as we used to.
Lobster.
You can either have lobster, or you can have steak, or you can have chicken. And the chicken sometimes it's fried, and they explain that. Oh, she's like, oh, so you get to pick what you want. And he's like, yeah, I don't know what's with the lobster. Like, we don't get that really as much, but or fish. And he's
Are you serious?
Oh, he's going through this whole thing, and she's
Wow.
talking to him like it's serious, but because she understands what this guy's saying, he's clueless because he's entitled and he thinks, well, I'm a banker, and we made some mistakes, and I'm here for 3 years and I should be treated well, and so he's not thinking what you're saying is that the guy that works on the line building Fords and pays 25% of his income over to taxes doesn't want to hear about how you're a little irritated that they don't have lobster anymore, bro.
No.
So she does this whole thing. They have tennis courts, they have golf, putting greens. They have it's not as bad as what everybody said, but it's still hearing about that. And what you were paying in taxes, people were absolutely floored. And as a result of that, they started cutting back on those types of programs. And the other thing is, because of that, they've never let cameras in since then.
Oh.
So even when like the FBI had to get special permission to bring in cameras when they interviewed Bernie Madoff, like that's been the last time. They wouldn't let him initially. When Barbara Walters, I think, interviewed him again, they were only allowed to bring like a tape recorder or something. Like it was the FBI who came in to interview him on camera in the prison. But no media person is coming in there to muck because they don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah. So when you were in there, what was it like for you? What was prison
What
like?
time period was that?
Yeah.
I came in just as they were switching over they switched over to what they call a national menu. So the prison population was still growing. This is in 2007.
Okay.
By the time I went into prison, it was late 2007, 2008. So I was arrested in late 2006. I was in the U.S. Marshals holdover for a year. So I was sentenced a year later, and it took a month or so to get me to Coleman. So I got to Coleman in December of 2007. And they were just switching over from what they called like regional menus, where the prison picked their own food program, their own what they're going to feed the inmates, to a national menu. And they did this. My understanding of the reason they did this is because so many prisons were having issues with theft of food, and the inmates weren't getting enough food, and a lot of the administrators were opening restaurants. And these boxes go in the back of my car, these go here.
Oh, okay.
So they came up with a national menu where it's like every Monday you have this, Tuesday, Wednesday, throughout the week. So and it switched like every 3 weeks. So I got there for about 2 months. I was there. And when I got there, I got the tail end of decent food.
How was the lobster?
There was no lobster, but I'll tell you what, listen, I'd been in the county. Well, I'd been in the U.S. Marshals holdover for a year. The first day I got there, scrambled eggs. They had bacon. They had grits. They had a fountain Coke machine. You could go up and get fountain Coke, which is my all-time favorite of all drinks ever. So you could get an actual fountain Coke. You could get Sprite. You get all Coke products. They had a thing with Coke. They brought them in. I mean, so it was. I remember when I ate the first meal there, I thought, this is amazing. Like I couldn't believe that they were feeding these guys like that. And of course, 2 months later, they switched to the national menu. And the food was not as good. It was not slop, which really is what I had expected. I saw Shawshank Redemption. Like I'm
right, exactly.
Slop,
Yeah.
And you're finding stuff in your food. That's really kind of what I expect, or at least I expected what the marshals were feeding us, which just wasn't a lot of food, and it wasn't great. But it wasn't horrible. Probably 2 or 3 times a week, you had a good meal. You had fried chicken, or you had a hamburger, or you had something that even the bad meals weren't bad. They just weren't great.
Chicken tetrazzini or something.
Yeah, they were. I'm not what they weren't. What?
I said chicken tetrazzini.
Yeah, yeah. I have no idea what it is. Like it's like you're making stuff up. Yeah, it's like, but it's still edible. It was still edible. Like it's not like, and some guys loved it. Like meals I hated. Some guys are walking around going, "You're gonna eat your liver? You're gonna get? I'll give you if you give me your liver, I'll give you my hamburger on Wednesday." And you're like, "I hate liver. Take it."
Yep.
You know.
So what was prison life like? Like what was a typical day for you?
In the medium, so first I went to the medium.
Yeah.
So I went to the medium, and by then I'd already been locked up a year. And after being locked up a year, I'd gotten all the coaching that I needed to understand that this is horrible to say. I say it all the time though. Like if you get stabbed in prison, you had it coming. Like, you hear these guys, they're so scared they got beat up, or you could get beat up or hurt or this or that. The truth is, if something bad, really bad happens, you probably brought it on yourself.
Like what's an example? How do you bring that upon yourself?
You gambled, you ran up a debt, you didn't pay them.
Oh.
Or you borrowed, or maybe you just borrowed money and you didn't pay. Maybe you ran up a store debt. Like they have what they call stores. Everybody in every unit, there'll be one, sometimes two guys that actually run like a little store out of their cell or their locker. So they keep almost everything that the commissary has. They just mark it up like 30 or 40%. So you want a bag of chips, you go down to cell 106 and you say, "Hey man, can I have some chips?" And then at the end of the week, he gives you a list for you to buy stuff from commissary for him.
Mm.
So it's a constant, he's constantly making 30, 40, 50% on whatever he lends out. And if somebody moves or stiffs him, I mean, you're making 50%.
Okay.
So you're going to be okay. So I would say that I had figured out that, so it would be that you run up debts. So you're typically gambling, you run up debts, you are disrespectful to someone. So you're talking bad about people, and that'll get you in trouble. These guys, like a ton of these guys, and especially in the medium, are bipolar. So you don't really know what's going to set them off. Right. And if you're actually rude or you're disrespectful, you're talking about somebody, you're definitely going to have a problem. Like I almost had a problem because I was closing my door too hard. Okay. I had a guy come to me and he started the conversation out with, "Hey Cox." And I was like, "Yeah, what's up?" And he goes, "Listen, man, I've been taking anger management." And I thought, this is not going to go good.
Yeah, starting with that.
This is not a good. You started the conversation off all wrong. I know I've done something. And he was like, he was my neighbor. And he's like, "You slam the door. Every time you leave, you slam the door. You slam. And these doors are thick and heavy. Like, I'm not meaning to do it. But I'm not so prideful that I would say, well, that's your problem, bro. What I said was, wow, man, I am so glad that you told me that, man. Sure. I apologize. I know how irritating that can be. And I did not realize, and I can't say I'll never do it again, but I'm going to say I will make a concentrated effort to not do it again. I said, please tell me if I do it again, though, because we all got to live here. And I'm sorry, bro. I really, and you could see it in his face, like, damn. I was hoping to pound this guy into the concrete right now. He just totally. So, I'm good with people.
Sure.
And so I would say I knew by the first day you can get yourself in trouble. So don't talk a lot. Don't run up debts. Don't talk. Don't argue over the TV. There's certain things you just don't argue over. You don't participate in. You don't discuss. And so my first day there, I got there, I was dressed out. They put you in like orange. I mean, not orange. They put you in a bus clothes, that you have like slacks and a white t-shirt. They give you a couple of things to hold you over until you can get your uniform.
Yeah.
And then you get your bedroll, you go to your unit. The guard gave me my cell. I met my cellie. He was Texicano. So he was from Texas. He was Mexican, but he was born in Texas. And like, he explained all this to me. Keep in mind, I have no idea what's going on. I learned so much you know, the way these guys talked from
Sure.
everything. So anyway, I go there, and I would say he introduced me. He showed me my cell, said, look, it was like a 3-man cell. He's like, but it's just you and me. You know, I got the bottom bunk, you'll get the top bunk. And he kind of explained everything. Super great guy, for Sally. And then, so what ended up happening was, within an hour, they start screaming on the PA system, lockdown, lockdown. And someone had been stabbed in the rec yard. So
Oh, what a way to start
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, no kidding.
the funniest part about that is that I'm standing there just like, everybody's running around, you know, they're running around to do stuff like get water, get heat up water for a soup, or get coffee before they get locked down, right? Because they have microwaves, but they're not accessible from your cell. So guys are trying to warm up stuff, and the cops walking around, we call them cops, the COs walking around screaming, lockdown, you know. And he immediately goes to the first cell and starts locking it. Like, if you're not in your cell when he locks it, now you've got a real problem, because now you're standing there like, I got to get in my cell, and they'll write you a shot. You might end up with a shoe. So if you were the last guy, you had plenty of time. You had at least 10 minutes. Takes them a while. There's a bunch of cells. So anyway, my cellie runs up to me and says, Cox, you got to go to the cell. And I was like, what's up? He goes, it's lockdown. I said, what happened? He goes, oh, see, so somebody got stabbed in the yard. And I go, someone was killed in the yard? And he goes, nah, man, they just stabbed him up a little bit.
Just a little stabbing, you know.
Yeah, and that was my thought. My thought was like, you're in a place where he just said stabbed him up a little bit.
A little bit.
Like, you are not
that tickled, you know.
Like, you're not prepared for this. You really need to keep to yourself.
That's funny. Now that was in the medium security.
That was the medium. And what ended up happening was I got a job within a month or two. Like, basically, I stayed in my cell most of the time and read, or I went to the library and read. And so within a month or so, I ended up getting a job as, well, two things. One, I was a GED tutor. And two, I started teaching the real estate class. The guy that was teaching the real estate class came to me and said, look, you have
Look
real
at
estate
Jerry
experience.
laughing.
And, you know, you have real estate experience. So why don't you take over the class? He said, I'm doing more and more legal work. And so I was like, yeah, sure. What is he? He's like, listen, it's not that hard, you know. And he showed me his kind of curriculum, and I was like, oh, I can do this. This is nothing. So I did that, and it was.
And these are sanctioned classes?
Yeah, it was the ACE course, Adult Continuing Education course.
Okay.
It was twice a week. At one point, I started teaching. It was the most popular course at Coleman after about 6 months, because, you know, I would get in there and I would do the whole, you know, who's here for drugs? You know, who's here for drugs? And, you know, these guys like, and I'd be like, listen, I'm like, you guys have no idea what a joke this is going to be for you guys. I was like, you have any idea what a leg up you guys have? I said, the 45-year-old white divorced doctor's wife is not going to go into your neighborhood. You are hustlers. You have the ability to go into those neighborhoods, knock on doors, get people to write up contracts, buy their houses cheap, renovate them, and sell them. And I said, and that's what we're going to learn in this class. How can I turn you guys into investors? Wow. You're not going to flip. You don't flip keys. You're going to flip houses. It's lucrative. And I go through the whole thing. Guys would walk up to me. So this was the first time in my life that this ever happened. And I don't know that I've ever been in an experience where this would have happened before, but it was just the oddest thing. After, let's say, the first or second class, as guys are kind of walking out, right? Because I'm market, make sure everybody's wants something. Hey, you got me on the register, right? Yeah. As they're leaving, guys are stopping and shaking my hand, bro. Wow. They're like, listen, that was amazing. That was an amazing class. I had guys stop me and tell me, look, this is the first time I actually think I can get out of prison and not sell drugs.
Wow.
So that's cool. You know, I gave them real world, you know, why you need to fix your credit, what your credit is, how to fix it, a very easy way to fix it. And I was like, listen, at one point, I probably had 15 or 20 people that I was maintaining their credit. And I was like, these are people that did not exist. And within 6 months, they had 700 credit scores. credit cards. Within a year, they had borrowing power in the hundreds of thousands. I was like, now, if I can do that with someone that doesn't exist, you can do it with you. It's not that hard. It's a simple formula, and I've already written it down for you. You don't even have to spell any of the big words. Here's what we're going to do. And we would go over the whole thing. And these guys would come up to me, friends of the guys in my class would come up to me and they go, I'm signing up for your class. And I go, oh, okay. And they go, yeah, bro, my celly, every time he comes back from your class, he says, man, I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be a millionaire. This guy's got me believing I'm going to be a millionaire. I can do this.
Wow.
I had guys that sat through that class 2 and 3 times. They could literally, I would be talking about things that I go, you could do this and this, and that's I go, oh, shoot. And the guy in the back of class would go, wraparound mortgage. Go, right. That's a wraparound mortgage. So, and I mean, he would just, he'd go, what about a second mortgage? I go, that's a good idea. What I was thinking was this, but you know what? You could try and get him to do a second mortgage. Right. He go, I mean, it was great. And
This kind of reminds me of a Stringer Bell kind of concept where drug dealers want to, change and manifest into businessmen.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. What I realized, like prior to going to prison, I had a vastly different idea of who ended up in prison.
Sure.
And the concept, not that I thought about it a lot because it was something that I never really thought about that much, but I had a very stereotypical, oh, they don't want to work. They just want to steal. They just want to sell drugs. But you go to prison and you start writing these guys' stories or hearing their stories or getting to know them. And you start to realize, like, you're sitting there talking to a guy and you're looking at him thinking, you didn't have a chance. You didn't have a chance in life. Like there was I can't imagine a scenario where you were going to get yourself out of this. But like everybody that has money is selling drugs. Your father's in prison. Your brothers and cousins are in and out of prison. They're all selling drugs. Your mom is, who knows what's going on with your mom. Nobody can teach you anything. You flunked you dropped out of school or were kicked out of school. Like you didn't have. Maybe you could have pushed your way through it if you had somebody in your life to help direct you. But it's hard to be that one beacon of light when there's so many people, pushing you down. And these guys have, when they're growing up, they don't really care about education. Like it's almost mocked. And so, what's cool is being a drug dealer and buying a car, and like they don't understand how credit works. They don't understand paying taxes. They don't understand what difference between a W-2 employee and a self-employed. They don't understand a down payment. They don't understand how a mortgage works. They don't understand any, very basic things that most people kind of slowly learn from their parents. They have no clue. So that was a great class. That, and I taught GED. So I, helped a bunch of guys get their GEDs, and eventually they started taking guys that couldn't pass the essay portion of the GED, and they would put them in a class with me, and I would help them. Maybe some guy took the GED twice and couldn't pass the essay portion, and so I'd sit down with them, and it was really a mistake. They had me sit down with one guy one time, and he passed. He got like a 5 out of 5, where he was getting like a 2 out of 5 before, and they were like, "We don't understand what's going on." Like the guy passed everything else, flying colors. He's not dumb. Okay, you sit with him? Sure. We sat with him for 2 or 3 weeks. He went and took the test. He passed it 5 out of 5. And I thought, oh, cool. Okay, cool. Well, they asked me to do that. That's fine. No, that was a mistake. Next thing I know, I got 8 guys sitting in my class. I'm like, what are you doing? What am I doing? Like any type of doing the right thing or achievement only put more work on me.
Well, that's a life lesson.
Right. I want to kick back and do nothing. You guys don't understand why I'm teaching GED. I can kick back and answer a question every 10 minutes. Now I'm a special GED person.
Let me ask you this. How long were you in the medium before you went to the minimum security? And what was like the major difference between the two?
So it was about 3 years before, and probably for about 4 or 5 months, I was desperately trying to stay in the medium.
Why?
Because by that point, I really had, I created like a little group of friends.
Okay.
1 or 2 or 3 people, and it's so funny because those friends were all saying, you want to go to the low. There are guys like you at the low. you're an oddball here. Like you shouldn't have never gone to me. This is, listen, and I'm talking to my counselors are telling me this. You should have never come to the medium. You know, your security level is like a 0. It started at like a 1 because I had a detainer for a probation violation that I got taken off within 6 months, and it dropped to like a 0. You have like a 0 practically. Only reason I had so much time, I had to go to a medium.
Okay.
Because you have to serve 20 years, 20 years or more, you have to start at a medium, no matter what your security level.
Oh, okay. So what's the difference between the two prisons though? Like the
I was just
biggest
going to
that
ask
jump out
that.
at you. Yeah.
The difference is that in the medium, if someone leaves a Snickers bar on your pillow, don't touch it. In the low, if they leave a Snickers bar on your pillow, you can eat it. You're gonna be all right.
All right, you have to
You have to explain that. Yeah, come on, you can't leave us hanging.
You've never listen. Anybody who's been in jail would be dying laughing right now. I'm sorry. So the like the Snickers, like in the medium, you know, you ever heard like some guy, some war daddy will come and leave something for you, and let's say you eat it. Let's say you pick it up and you eat the Snickers bar. Then he comes back, he's like, I'm gonna want something for that. Like, oh my God, I'm in a bad spot.
Oh
like,
boy, yeah.
You're 6'2", you've got a life sentence. I got a major problem. And I used to joke that, yeah, but in the low, you can eat it. Like, because there's a good chance that guy's not going to be a problem. You just tell him, man, get out of my cell. What are you doing? Yeah, I ate your Snickers bar. So what? What are you going to do? Nothing. You don't want to leave the low. Like once you get to the low, you don't want to go to a medium.
Okay.
It's too good at the low. So at the medium, people are getting stabbed.
Sure.
Now it's and there's more gang activity and there's more, but the problem is like, I wasn't, you know, I'm a soft white guy. Nobody wants me in their gang. Like I'm not, you know, I'm not a benefit unless I'm doing your books. So, you know, maybe if they were running a gambling ring or something, I could do the books or something, but yeah, I'm no benefit to you. But the truth is that, you know, I felt good in the medium. I had guys that were there that knew me. Everybody knew me, even the people that don't necessarily like you, you know, they've seen you so much. They know you, that they've got friends that you're helping, and you, and in the medium, I was like Google, like you're like one of the smartest people on the compound. So I've got guys coming to me saying, can you read my legal work for me? Can you read this for me? I got a letter. Can you help me write this letter? Hey, I have to file this, you know, a BP, you know, a complaint, or what they, you know, it's called like BP8 or BP9 or BP. I have to fill this out. Can you help me? Yeah, I can help you. No problem. You know, I'm always willing to help. So, you know, I was a smart guy that people liked, and I had friends that were there. So I didn't want to leave.
Would you say you had purpose?
At the medium, I had just started writing my book, and I definitely had a purpose. Yeah, I liked teaching the real estate class. It made you somebody, you know, it gave you a certain status. And so when at first, probably the first few months, I didn't feel secure at the medium, but now I did. You know, all the COs knew me. Listen, there was a time, one time, where at like 8 or 9 o'clock, keep in mind, they locked the whole place down. One time I have a CO come, I'm watching TV. There's 100 guys watching. We're all sitting in chairs looking up, watching this TV and this cop goes up. He goes, Cox, come here. And I'm like, yeah, what's up? And he goes, come here. He walks me over to the door, because they talk to you like you're just a dog. You could ask questions, and they're like, yeah, okay, just go here. They just ignore you. So he goes, he opens the door, opens the second door. We're locked down. It's like 8, 9 o'clock at night. He goes, go to A1. And I go, what's for what? And he's like, go to A1. I'm like, all right. Locks the doors. I climb down the stairs, you know, go down the stairs, walk to A1. It's like practically like a city block away, get down there. And these are like 4-story buildings. So I get down there, there's like 4 guards standing in a circle. I walk up and I go, yeah, what's up? And the guy goes, all right, so listen, I'm looking at this townhouse. Okay. Initially they were selling for $350,000.
That is,
you know what's going on in the real estate market, right? So now they're selling for, and he's sitting there. And what was so funny about that is, as he explains the scenario, he stopped, and I said, okay, well, wait a minute. How many units are in the subdivision? He's like, oh, it's supposed to be 200. They've only built 150. I don't think they're going to build the other 50. And I went, how many are rental units? And he's like, I don't know. I said, you need to first find out how many are rental units, because then you can, and I start explaining to him whether or not it's a good deal or not.
Wow.
And so we have a 10-minute conversation, and then they start asking me other questions. You know, what would you do? Like, if you wanted to invest in real estate, what would you do right now? How would you? I was like, well, right now I would. And I start having this conversation. Then at some point I'm thinking, like, I gotta go, bro. Like, they're gonna count us soon. Like, this doesn't look good for me. People can see me out the window talking to 4 guards. I don't like if people didn't already think I was a snitch, this isn't helping my rep. So I end up, finally they let me go. I go up there and go back up, and everyone's like, what's going on? What's up, cop? I'm like, this guy's buying like a townhouse on a piece of property. And and so I try and explain it. Who knows whether but by that point, I'm good. They like me there. So then I go to the medium. The medium is just less violent.
Okay.
Do you have
a roommate? Do you have a cellmate, or do you have your own cell?
Okay, at the medium, we had our own cells. There were 2 and 3 man cells. You have a toilet sink combination and a locked door, and you're not getting out. In the low, it's they call them open bays. So you have cells, but they're cubicles, right? So it's like a 5-foot wall that's made of concrete. So you have like a little square, no toilet, nothing like that, because there's no door. So you can, at any time, you can leave your cell, go into the bathroom. There are large shared bathrooms like you'd see in any,
like a dorm or something, like a college dorm,
like at a rec center, or you go to the gym like that. You go, maybe there's 6 toilets, 5 or 6 urinals, and maybe 10 showers. There's 160 to 180 guys per unit. Still 2 and 3 man cells, or cubes, and and it's loud. Like, because the walls don't go, so it's loud all the time. Like, all the things that people think about prison, it's like the opposite. People think, oh, you're isolated, it's just you, and it's quiet, and no, God, I prayed for quietness. I mean, you're never alone. There's always yelling and screaming. It's for stupid reasons. Like, somebody's trying to find somebody, and they walk in the unit and they just start screaming the guy's name. Like, and and these guys talk loud, they yell all the time. It was horrible.
How often did they go through your room for contraband, that kind of thing? How often did they just totally roll your room?
It depends on the CO.
Okay.
Probably should have been once a week. There were times nobody went in my cell for months.
Oh,
they do them randomly,
Yeah.
they have to shake down 12 a day or something like this, right? So that doesn't happen. A lot of times they'll just walk in the room and jot down that they shook it down. And then there are other guards that are super vigilant, and they're always shaking you down. They're taking every last thing, and that's the first 2 years of your job. And then after that, they're just like, what am I doing? All these guys hate my guts. They hate me. And in the end, I barely ever find something. If I do find something, now the thing is that the COs they give them bonuses if they find stuff. So if they find a cell phone or they find drugs, they'll give them like a bonus. They'll give like $200, $400. And so then the COs end up trying to kind of, they try and get the inmates to work with them and tell them to try and get their bonus, to get these, extra bonuses for, anybody.
What happens to the inmate who has this contraband in there?
Oh, he's got a problem. He's going to the shoe. He's going to the shoe for probably 90 days. If he had a cell phone, he's probably getting shipped to another institution. And, they have different low custodies. So Yazoo is a low, but it's like a disciplinary low. So it's more like a medium. There's guys getting hurt all the time, constantly getting into fights, a lot of what they call politics. And there were politics at the low at Coleman, but nothing near what I've heard at other places.
What do you mean by politics?
So obviously there's gang politics, but I'm not really talking about gang politics. I'm talking about, like, if you're, let's say you're a for the sake of, are you this is monetized? Your channel's monetized?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, so for the sake of monetization, I'll say it one time, for for looking at pictures of young people.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Or maybe touching somebody inappropriately or
Oh,
whatever.
okay.
Right. So you've got SOs, so you got the SOs. Well, what happens with these guys is that there was a point where there weren't a lot of them. And so they were brutalized. But at the mediums now, there's a bunch of them. At the lows, it's like almost 50% of the prison population at low security prisons have some kind of charge like that.
Wow.
Maybe not. They may not be there on that charge. It may have been in their past. Maybe they have a state charge that they finished the sentence. They went home. Now they reoffended on something else. Now they're here, but that's in their past. So when they show their paperwork, they've got a problem.
Mm.
So as far as politics, like that's a good example. Like they don't get to watch TV. Like you're not going to come in the TV rooms and watch TV. You have like black TV rooms, Hispanic TV rooms, white TV rooms.
Really?
I always thought it was funny because they called the white TV room, they called it the cracker box. So they got like a cracker box. And so, and it wasn't so bad that a guy you couldn't maybe walk in, they were watching something in the black TV room and you'd walk in and kind of glance up and watch it for a minute or two. But if you're there for 4 or 5 minutes, it's basically like, yo, bro, what are you doing? And they go, oh, okay. Now in some prisons, you don't even walk in, like don't even glance over there. But I stopped watching really very much TV. I might have watched a movie every once in a while. I mean,
well, when you watch, like TV shows, the stereotypical thing is, like a prison yard where all the blacks are in one area, the Hispanics are in one area, the whites are almost all Aryan Nation,
Right.
and you kind of have to be a part of something. Is that true where you were at?
It's true in a penitentiary, right? Like in a pen, but
Right.
guys like me don't, you can't send me to a pen. Like, I mean, I've never had any violence in my history. I didn't go to, like all the things that I would have had to stab multiple people, like to get myself to a security level where they sent me to a pen. Now I have a friend that ended up in a pen, but he went to prison and continually got in trouble while he was in prison. So he started at a medium and ended up going to a pen.
Oh, because he was messing up when he was okay.
He kept getting in trouble. And also he came in with a bunch of priors, and none of them were violent. They're all white collar type things, but eventually he ended up in a pen. But he started off at a high security level to begin with. For a guy who's got a bunch of white collar crimes, he probably started off at a 5 or a 7 or 8 or something, and I didn't have those. So
sure.
So I would say the politics, it's very much segregated where you sit with they call them cars, right? So you sit with your car. Your car would be like if you're in the Florida car. Why? Because we're all from Florida. Me and these 7 guys are from Florida. So they all sit together. Or maybe you're all a part of a gang. And so that gang basically sits in a certain area. But someone like me, I always refer to myself as kind of like it's like a non-combatant in a combat zone. These guys are politicking and they're arguing and screaming, and I'm going to work. I'm coming back. I read. I go to work. I come back. I read a book. I write a letter. And then when I started writing, I'm writing my books, writing outlines. I'm interviewing guys. Like I kept myself very busy. I don't have time to play cards. And cards isn't going to get me anything. And I kept thinking, someday you're going to get out of here. So someday you're going to get out of here. What are you going to have done with this time? Like if you go in there and you think, oh, they gave me all this time. I always love that. They gave me all this time. Like you didn't commit a crime. You didn't participate in this at all. But like I used to think that I've got all this time. So after a couple of years, when I stopped kind of, whining about it, and I always remember so my brother-in-law has a cousin named Reese, who was in the medium. So
with you?
With me. So when I got to the medium, he found me and he knew I was coming.
Yeah.
Imagine calling up at that point, my 70-year-old mother saying, Mom, I'm at Coleman. It's a prison. She's like, I know where Coleman is. And I go, okay. She goes, are you at the medium or the low? I'm at the low. I know. I said, I'm at the medium. Like, I don't know what Coleman is. Like, and I go, I'm at the medium. She goes, okay, you need to look up Reese Townsend. He's your cousin. Like, I have a cousin in prison? And she's like, well, he's Jack's cousin. She goes, but that makes him your cousin. So he's your cousin. She goes, you need to find him. I'm like, I don't know how I'll find him. She's like, well, he works in the maintenance yard, in the maintenance. He's head of maintenance there. And you need to find him. I said, okay. I couldn't find him. So 2 days later, one day he walks in my cell and he goes, Matt Cox? And I go, yeah. He goes, my name's Reese Townsend. And he shook my hand. I was like, oh my God, I'm your cousin. I was like, oh, okay. But Reese did give me some great advice. Like, one, the best piece of advice was, he's like, don't complain. Nobody wants to hear you complain. You're not making anybody's time easier. He's like, your best bet is to try and make other people's time easier. They'll like you for it. They'll want to be around you. They won't talk bad about you. They won't hate on you. You know, that's a term. I've learned all these great terms. Like, to me, passing out, they call it falling out. He fell out. I never heard fell out until I got to prison. I'm like, fell out. What does that mean? He tripped? He fell out. You know, he collapsed. He fell on the ground. He passed out. Yeah, he passed out. Okay. So anyway, yeah, I made Reese, and Reese was like, look, don't complain. You know, keep yourself occupied. He's like, you know, you got to keep yourself occupied, keep your mind going, read. You'll be good for a couple of years. And you know, he had all these great little tidbits because he had done so much. He'd been in and out of prison his whole life. But he wasn't stupid. He probably would have been an amazing, everybody always says this, he should have been a historian. He should have been a college professor at a university, but he liked meth.
Oh yeah. That's
so
bueno.
Yeah. I mean, this is a guy who was brilliant.
Yeah.
And knew, he'd read over probably hundreds of books on World War II, could tell you every single thing about every battleship, every tank, how many tanks, how many battles, how many people were killed, what direction they came from, what the conversations were to decide on how the battle should be fought. I mean, it was amazing. But yeah, so one of the things he said was, don't complain. Nobody wants to hear you complain. No guy wants to hear you whine about your 26-year sentence when he's going to leave here in a box. Right. So just do yourself a favor. No matter how much time they gave you, you're always going to think it's too much time. He said, so try and figure out something to do with that time. And that's what I did. Eventually, after a few years, I kind of stopped whining and feeling bad for myself and started thinking to myself, you know, in a way, you've got an opportunity. Like, you've got a ton of time here and you got no bills. You got no bills and a ton of time. What can you do with that time? You can learn to play cards and piss away your time that way. You can play handball, you could play soccer, you could play but in the end, you're going to walk out of here with nothing. What, a great physique? No, that's a mistake. What can you do with that time? You know, so that's what I decided. It's when I decided to start writing these stories.
So Jerri, in your career as an FBI agent, did you ever have to go into any prisons and interview people? Any of the inmates?
Absolutely.
Well,
yeah,
well,
but usually you're not actually in the prison environment. I mean, usually there's a conference room someplace and they bring, you know, the inmates there.
And they tell the inmate, like, he has to go to medical.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's like, oh, you got a medical appointment, you're going to medical. It's like, I'm going to medical. It's
but yeah, actually, I had more experience going to prisons when I was a juvenile probation officer, because that's when they were into that scared straight.
Oh, okay.
And so I did that quite often. I don't know how effective it was, or if they still do the scared straight program where they take juveniles and they actually send them to a prison where inmates can yell at them and tell them all the horrible things that will happen to them if they continue, you know, their bad activities and end up, you know, in jail, in prison. But do you remember those scared straight?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know of that ever happening at Coleman, but you know, and you know, who knows?
Most of those were in medium or like the hardcore like penitentiaries when they would do that. And from what I have read and what I have seen, it had an immediate effect, but it wasn't long lasting.
Yeah, that's what I would think. I mean, you really need somebody in your life constantly.
Yes. You know, it had the shock and awe effect of like, oh man, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. But then you slide back into your environment and you kind of go back to your old ways. You know, the recidivism rate was super high, unfortunately. You know, it sounds like a good idea. You know, you scare them straight. You know, it's like, okay, don't be me. You don't want to wind up here. You don't want to be doing what I'm doing. You don't want my life. But then you go back and, you know, it's human nature. Sometimes we got short memories, man. You know, it just,
Yeah, they're going back to the same environment.
yes.
Right. And
Yeah.
they're certainly not thinking of consequences. Can I ask Matt a question?
Sure.
I would like to know what you think are the myths and misconceptions that people think about prison, but just aren't true. And which ones are true?
You know what's funny about that is like, so you know, I do these podcasts, and there's always these guys that will say, somebody will tell a story, and some people will leave comments like, that's not true, this is how it works. It's like, okay, listen, in the prison that you went to in California, you know, for 6 months or 5 years or whatever, I'm sure what you're saying is true, but it's every prison's different, and the federal system is different than the state systems. So, you know, I don't know what I noticed, and I have talked to other guys, is that one is the whole the rape thing. You know, the thing is like in federal prisons or in prisons in general, like that, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but that's like every guy's worst fear.
Sure.
6 guys rush in and beat you unconscious or whatever.
All Shawshank Redemption. Yeah.
Oh God, it's horrible. Like that was just like such a horrible
Yeah.
thought for me. But
Right.
the truth is that, you know, there are gay guys in prison. There's lots of them. You know, they're in prison and they're interested, and they will basically, you know, provide, you know, whatever. It's a business for these guys, and they make it a business. You know, it's what they have to work with. So, and there are guys that will link up with other guys for, you know, I don't know if it's so much protection, but kind of like, you know, for a relationship. And so you see these guys, and you see these lifers who are massively huge,
Yeah,
with a girlfriend, you know, in the prison. And that's probably one of my, people always ask me, what's the worst thing you ever saw? And I always say that the worst thing I ever saw in prison was, it wasn't, and I actually was in a cell one time, and I heard a guy, it was an attempted rape. I don't think that guy actually completely, but this was in the U.S. Marshals holdover, and everybody could hear, and, you know, nobody did anything. There was nothing to do. But and I've seen people get stabbed, and I've seen people get hit with locks, which was way worse than the stabbing, just because of the amount of blood. But I've seen horrific things that have happened. But probably the worst, most humiliating thing I saw was a guy who was 6'2", massive, life sentence, in the medium, having an argument with his girlfriend. It was the saddest thing. It was the most embarrassed. I've never been so humiliated and embarrassed for another person in my life. And I mean, the guy walks into the library. There's only like 8 guys in the library, and his girlfriend, who has, I'm telling you, this could have been a woman. Braids, the whole thing, legs crossed, reading like a Vogue, you know. And the guy comes over and walks up and says, "Baby, can I talk to you outside?" And she goes, it just keeps reading, baby, please, baby, can I please talk to you outside? And so we're all now looking, because when the guy walked in, we thought this guy's never been in the library. Like, the library in the low was packed. The library in the medium, there's like 8 guys. You could sit 40 or 50. There's like 6. So we're sitting there, and then he would look around. As soon as he'd look around, we'd all go and look right back at her, and then we'd slowly look back up. And then he actually put his hand on his girlfriend's shoulder, and she goes, "Touch me!" And he goes, "Oh, baby, please, can I come to you outside, baby, please?" And I'm like, this is so bad. It's so bad. Finally, she gets up, she goes outside, comes back, walks in. He walks in back after her after a couple of minutes. Tries to grab her by the arm, pulls away. She says, "I don't like the way you talk to me in front of your friends." And I mean, it was like, this guy couldn't have been more embarrassed. I couldn't have been more embarrassed for another human being ever.
Wow.
And that was probably, it was so bad. Even thinking about it, it's so, anyway. And I saw guys get stabbed and but when you find out about those things, what happened when this guy got hit with a lock or stabbed or this and that, you always find out it's like, well, what were you thinking? You ran up like a $2,000 debt on drugs and then told the guy, what you going to do? What I'm going to do is now I have to go get a lock. I have to do something or everybody's going to think that they can steal from me. And maybe, and you're banking on the fact that he won't do anything because his family lives close to us. He won't want to leave. And he's got it good here. So he's going to let it go. But the truth is they're like, look, I have to do something and I'll take my chances on whether or not I'll get shipped or not. That's what a lot of times it was. Because if he doesn't, then everybody thinks this guy is a mark. Because it is a horrific environment. It's horrible.
But you made it work for you.
I mean, I did because I was busy and I stayed away from all that. And that has nothing to do with me. And I didn't partake in it. I didn't talk bad about people. When I got to the low, I started writing my book. And then when I finished my book, I started writing another guy's book. And people saw me writing. A lot of people would come up to me and they'd say, are you doing legal work? And I was like, no, I'm just writing I'm writing people's stories. And so once I got a couple of guys into Rolling Stone magazine, everybody knew. Guys are walking around with Rolling Stone magazine, reading it, and my name's in Rolling Stone, and they're the guy that I got in Rolling Stone, he's there, or he had just left, and they're like, oh my God, bro.
I'm curious now. You talk about writing. Are you handwriting these books, or do you have access to a computer or a typewriter, or what does that look like?
I hand wrote. So you handwrite it on legal pads, which you buy from commissary, or you steal from Unicorn. And so you write them out and then I would type them. So we have something called core links, which allows you to email people to the outside, but not directly. It goes through it goes onto like a site and then they check the site.
Okay.
And then they can leave you a message there and then you can check the site. So there's no direct communication, but you can send them stuff, emails. And so what I would do is I would write, once I was done with the book, I would then type out each chapter. The chapters would be separate because you can only type so much in an email for the system. So it'd be like chapter 1A, chapter 1B, chapter 1C, and that's a whole chapter. And I would email that to somebody. So you email that to someone and they then put it in a Word document. And so that's how when I was finally doing the book, I would email all the chapters. And because keep in mind, once I email it, I no longer have those chapters.
Gotcha.
It's not like your system where you can go back and alter it. You don't have Word. So I have to type it all out and I have to email it. And you get charged for all of this. You get charged for everything. Charged for phone calls, charged for using the computer to email. And it's the only thing you really do on the computer. So I would send it off and somebody would put it into a Word document and then they would read through it. Or maybe they just mail it back to me and I'd pass it out to a bunch of the guys. They send me 3 copies and I'd pass it out. And then I'd call on the phone or I'd mail it back to them. It was a long process, but I have the time. All right. People would read it and they say, hey, this doesn't make sense. Or, hey, this is a run-on sentence. And you've got school teachers there. You have, there was like 3 guys from NASA that were at the low.
Wow.
So, hey, I'm going to have this guy from NASA read my book. Tell me what the typos are. And so it's not like they were at the low. They were very, very sharp people at the low. And so, yeah, that definitely helped.
All right, let's get out of jail. Let's go on to your childhood. More cheery stuff here. I know you had an alcoholic dad. You weren't doing so great in school, the dyslexia stuff, all that. How did this contribute to your criminal endeavors later, or did it?
It's funny because I when people used to ask me, why'd you do it? I used to always say, well, I need the money. I committed a crime because I needed the money. And that may be true the first few times, but once you've got 50,000 in the bank or 100,000 in the bank or $500,000 in the bank, it's like, well, why are you still right? You don't need the money and you got away with it. Like, why aren't you stopping? So I think that I always wanted to impress my dad because I was not the son he felt he deserved. My dad was extremely smart. He was sailed through school, made great money, you know, drove BMWs, lived in an amazing house, you know, my mother, you know, what it was amazing. And, you know, they adopted 3 children because my mom wasn't supposed to be able to have children. And then found out when she's 40 years old that she's pregnant with me. But, you know, I'm not extremely athletic, not extremely tall, wasn't good in school, like all the things that my dad was, like I wasn't. And so I never really impressed him until I started the doing real estate. And then he was very impressed. You know, he could see how well I was doing. And suddenly I'm not coming and asking for $200 to pay my electric bill or to pay my credit card. And now I'm hiring my brother to work as a handyman, and I own multiple rental properties, and I own, you know, I'm coming and saying, hey, you know, Dad, I got this property I want to buy. Can you, you know, if you want, like I was going to go to a hard money guy, but if you want to lend me, you know, 60 grand, I'll give you 70 grand back in about 3 months.
Wow.
Like that's a hell of an investment. But yeah. And so he gives me 70 grand and I give him, you know, whatever. You know, he gives me 60 grand. I give him $70,000 back a few months later, or then he gives me 80 and I give him $95,000 back, you know, 4 months later. And then and then this is happening. And then he's like, you know, this is the best investment I've ever, you know, and I'm driving an Audi. I'm driving a BMW. I'm married. I live down the street from his house where my brother-in-law, who's a lawyer, lives down the street. Like I've got a house that's the same square footage as my brother-in-law, who's a high-priced lawyer. Like my parents are like, this is insane. My wife, she didn't work. She's raising our son, and we've got like 54 rental units. All she does is collect rent and rent them out. Like he's like, this kid, which I did not think was, I remember he told me that when I got my degree, that basically I should think about being a caricature artist at Busch Gardens or Disney World. And it was like, not that there's anything wrong with that, but that was like, he's like, that's basically what you're capable of doing. Or maybe selling cars, you know, like you're a salesman.
So what was your degree in?
Fine arts. But it was, so he was so, and to him, I assure you, he was not saying that as that would be an amazing job. I would be so proud of you. It was like, that's about the best you could do. And so when things started going good, you know, and I'm going on vacation for a week here and to Puerto Rico and to Mexico and to, you know, I'm doing well. Like that was great. Even though it was all fraud.
So
it was worth it.
How did what some might say were smaller cons or frauds, i.e. the bottle of whiteout, if you read the book or you know, Matt, you're going to know the story, turn into multi-million-dollar scams? How did that happen?
I think, you know, I mean, the simplest version is answer is like just arrogance, right?
And how soon did it happen?
Oh, I mean, very quickly. Like I whited this thing out. Come on, I've never done anything criminal. Like
so you started out, you were a broker, right? A mortgage broker?
I was a mortgage broker. Like I hadn't done anything illegal, and I was even terrified to do that. And my manager told me to white this, you know, this 30-day late. It's a 30-day late on a verification of rent. The woman had been 30 days late within the last 2 years. She was my borrower, and there's no way they're not going to lend her the money. So my manager told me to white it out. So I whited out the 30-day late, made a copy, stuck it in the file. The loan closed. And so within a week or so, I'm getting more stuff in, and I got a borrower who doesn't make quite enough on his W-2. You know, if he made an extra $6,000 last year, he could get the loan. So I altered that, sent it in. The loan closed. You know, it slowly started being like, what you need to send in is a perfect file. And you need to figure out how they'll be able to detect that. So anytime that I got caught, like, you know, it was easy to get caught and then blame it on your borrower. Are you saying my borrower gave me a fake W-2? Are you saying my borrower, like, oh my gosh, I
So
can't
these are the underwriters that might come back at you, correct?
Yes. And then of course you immediately, they're not going to call them up. They're just like, yeah, we can't do the loan. And then if you called, if they just said denied and they said, oh, this didn't check out, you could call them and say, I don't understand. I've called him at this number before. They're like, yeah, well, the problem is, and then they would explain to you what the issue was. And you thought, oh, it's a cell number. Had I registered it with the business directory, they would have checked the business directory, seen the cell number, and that loan would have gone through. But they didn't, or he didn't, and I didn't. And okay, so now I know the next time that happens, this is how I need to correct that. So, once I started making money, I opened my own mortgage company, which even made me in a better position to find those things out. Because if my brokers did something wrong, the owners of the lending institutions we were running these loans through would call me and say, your broker did this. He did? He seems like such a honest person. And they would tell me what, and I go, how'd you find that?
What kind of time frame are we looking at though? I mean, you're this broker guy, your manager tells you, hey, what, a little white out here and there, we could kind of fudge a few things, which is bank fraud or mortgage fraud.
Up to within a year and a half, I owned my own. Within a year and a half, I owned my own mortgage company.
So you were more or less printing your own money by then.
By then, yeah, it was, there were certain things you just can't get around.
Yeah.
But very few, very little that I couldn't get around.
What were you feeling as all this was snowballing? Excitement, dread?
No, it was excitement. I was excited. I loved it. I mean, I loved getting the phone calls. I loved being the guy that had all the answers. You love when you walk in, you got 2 or 3 brokers, go, hey, bro, can I talk to you real quick? Matt, can I talk to you? Yeah, what's up? Listen, that was always you knew something was up. Listen, can I close the door? Okay.
Oh, as a boss, I'll stop you right there. As a boss, being a supervisor for cops, whenever one of your cops came in and said, hey, Sarge, hey, can I close the door? And it's like, nothing good is going to come from this conversation. Nothing.
That's almost that's the equivalent of, I've been taking anger management classes.
Yeah.
Like, this is not good. Not good. So yeah. So yeah, they would come in and say, look, here's the thing, this guy, this guy, this, and I can't figure it out. How do I, how can I make this work? I know I can make it work. I just can't figure it out. And then, okay, what do you have? And then they'd lay it out and I'd say, okay, here's what we can do. We'd figure out a way to make this deal work or that deal work, or
not always legally.
No, almost never legally.
Okay. So when or if did you ever tell yourself, man, I got to stop before I get busted? Was that ever a thought in your head?
At that time, I don't think I thought that, because they seemed so minor. And even when we got caught, like, I mean, red-handed, we're caught, it's a problem, this is massive. We still just, like, I refinanced the properties, or I paid them back, or what's great is when everybody involved in a transaction, nobody wants to call the FBI. Nobody wants the police to come and be involved. Nobody. There's no benefit for anybody to do that. They all want to work together, unless it's just like this massive fraud and they've lost millions. That's when they're going to call the FBI. It's just, there's no alternative. Now we basically have to do the right thing, because we're never going to get our money back. So
at a real basic rudimentary level, how do you run these cons? How did you do these scams?
I mean, it depends. When it was first, when it was just fraud. So I think there's a huge difference between fraud and a scam. Like, if it is just fraud, like, let's say you want to buy a 4-unit building, and so I would commit fraud to make sure that loan went through. Maybe you don't have the down payment. You don't have the 20% to put down, but you've got good credit. You got a job. I can show that you can pay. I feel good that you're not going to probably go under. Then how do I figure out how to, jack up the purchase price, bring the money, get the money back to you, so that we temporarily bring $80,000 so that you can get back 65 or 75,000. So you put down a very small down payment on this property. How do I figure that out? Can I get it to appraise higher? Can I get the money back? Can I, we try and figure that out. How can we get maybe a higher LTV? Maybe I have to say you live in the house. You're living in the quadplex, you know? So we'd figure out how to manipulate that transaction. That's just fraud, right? But a scam is when I'm saying this is everything about this is fabricated. Nobody's ever intending to pay this mortgage. So this is a scam. I'm trying to get the bank to give me $500,000 and I want to walk away. You know, if they figure it out, great. I just don't want it to lead back to me, or I've got it set up so that they won't figure it out. So it doesn't matter, but that's a scam. To me, that's a scam. From the very beginning, I'm trying to rip someone off. Fraud to me is you're acquiring a loan that you should not have. You didn't really qualify for it, but you're going to pay it. So you committed fraud to get that. That's not really a scam. As you know, I'm not trying to rip the bank off. The guy's got to pay it. His intent is to pay it. So,
All right.
So they're both illegal.
Right. So
Well,
Jerri,
I promise you, Jerry doesn't see a difference.
No.
between the two.
so Jerri, how many of these did you deal with, and did it look like this?
Oh yeah, I was involved in a major mortgage fraud case. And it was interesting because it was a person who was known as a major drug dealer in Camden, New Jersey, who was trying to do that Stringer Bell thing from The Wire, where he wanted, now that he had all this money, he wanted to be able to do something with it because otherwise, because of, the banking system, the only thing he could do was spend it. And he wanted to be able to use it and make it grow. And so he was going into Camden and some of the lower income neighborhoods and renovating houses and flipping them and then getting buyers to lie on their mortgage applications to be able to qualify. And basically what he was doing was creating false jobs. Many of these people didn't even have a job, but he would get false, W-2s and make it look like get people to say they worked someplace where they didn't. And so they really didn't qualify for a mortgage, but the reality was they couldn't afford the mortgage anyway.
Right.
And so when they would get in the house, then eventually it would be foreclosed on because they just didn't have any means to pay it. And so that was really fascinating because it was the combination of, a drug case and a mortgage fraud case at the same time. But that's
okay.
where I could see the damage that these frauds, not scams, played in the community. Because the drug dealer that Kenny Jenkins, matter of fact, was his name. He's rationalizing in his mind that he's helping, people in the community get into homes. But the reality is he did a really bad job of flipping the houses in the first place. He cut a lot of corners, didn't get the permits and things, so it wasn't done very well. And then eventually these people are not going to be able to pay the mortgage because they don't even have a job. And
Right.
so it really was a scam. He
Yeah, I was going to
knew
say
that he
that's
was
just
going for the money.
Yeah, that's a scam. That's just like he didn't have his goals properly laid out. Like, is your goal, if his goal was to renovate the house, it was to launder his money, then he could have gone in, bought the house cheap, done all the renovations, and then put it with someone on, a real estate agent, sold it to a legitimate buyer. And then when he did his taxes, he says, look, I bought the house for 50. I did 10,000 in work. He really did 60, and then I sold it. So I made $40,000, $50,000, in profit, and I'll pay taxes on that. Now that's money that you can't take from me. That's his goal. But instead, in the process, he obviously thought I can make more money. Okay, well, you're not laundering your money now. Now you're running a scam. You're just going to get in trouble.
Right.
Like if
And
you're
even
trying
his girlfriend was the realtor. I mean, that's
Right.
how he thought of the scam in the first place. And
Okay.
so they were really taking advantage of
and
the
then
people.
doing shoddy work.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh,
you're putting people in
terrible
that
work.
people that can't afford the property. You're doing shoddy work.
That's like college housing. This reminds me of when I was in college. There was one guy in town. It was a smaller college. It was like 10,000 students, and it was in a small town. And there was one real estate company that rented out all these units that were just subhuman. I mean, there was holes in the wall. The heat sometimes worked. I mean, they were just literal, just shitholes. But there was a line of students, waiting to rent these places. And it's like, hey, you know what? We don't have hot water. Yeah, maybe we'll get to it next week. That kind of thing. And just horrible. And they couldn't build these things fast enough. And they were all just horrible, just icky, just places to live. So, Matt, when you were at the top of your game, were you proud of yourself? Did you get cocky, you think?
I was cocky I'm still cocky. I mean, I was definitely cocky. It was like every decision that I made was just, based on just pure arrogance. And there was, it really was, I started feeling invincible, and I just thought I was just so cool, and, felt so great about myself, and everything was wonderful. And, and I thought I was so smart. They're never going to figure this out. Even when they catch me, I get away with it. Even when they've caught me, I've talked my way out of it and gotten my way out of it. And I've got a perfect scam going. And, it was just, it was very cocky, very arrogant. If I had, and probably, and as a result of that, slipped up multiple times.
Well, I was going to ask you, it's like, didn't you want to tell someone? The fewer people that knew that you were doing something illegal, the better off you are. Didn't you want to tell somebody how smart or clever you were? Didn't you want to be like bragging about it?
When I was in Tampa, everybody was involved. Like when I was in Tampa, like there were like 15, 16 people that were, probably 20 people knew what was going on, but there was probably 15 people that were actively involved. There are brokers that are doing loans for people that don't exist. Like I was manufacturing people that didn't exist. So you've got brokers who are doing loans for people that they've never showed up to sign the documents. Like they didn't give you I gave you the W-2s and pay stubs. I'm the one who, you bring the 10 or the to 1003, but it's a residential loan application. They'd bring it to me and I'd look it over and I'd sign it for the guy. Like, they're 100%, they 100% understand that this person doesn't exist. So, everybody was involved. And so, which was, obviously stupid, but when I was on the run, almost nobody knew what was going on.
Right.
That's when I really realized that's the part of the problem, is too many people know.
Yep.
And I needed more people to know what was going on in Tampa, because the scam in Tampa was nearly indetectable. It went on for 18 months before anybody realized it. And they only picked up on it because a friend of mine got arrested and cooperated, and they put together a task force, which was handed over to the FBI. And had he not, then I don't know how long that scam would have gone on.
Wow.
But it was, it was just ego, stupidity, ego.
I have a question I have to ask.
Go ahead.
What did your father say once he realized that it was all a charade? That this was a scam.
Well, keep in mind, I was already on federal probation. So when I ran the mortgage company for about
No, I mean the first time he realized that this great thing that you were doing, he was so proud of you, was illegal. The first time.
So the first time, he didn't really know what happened. All he knew was that I came in one day and I said, listen, I need $75,000 to get a lawyer. And he was like, okay. And he said, can get you the $75,000 tomorrow. He said, what's going on? I said, I'm going to have to hire a federal defense attorney who was actually used to be my parents' neighbor. So I said, I can't tell you what's going on. I can just tell you that I'm going to be charged with a federal crime dealing with bank fraud. And that's really it. And I remember my mom goes, well, what did you do? And he goes, Margaret, he just said he couldn't tell us what he did. So,
oh, poor mom. Oh,
I
God.
know. She goes, oh, Lord, Matthew. So, he's like, are you going to have to go to jail? I was like, I don't think so. I don't really know yet, but I don't think so.
So you're put on federal probation for the first time you got busted, and you went straight back to criminality, like with of vengeance right after,
Oh,
right?
yeah. I never stopped, never really stopped. So,
Wow.
he gave me 75 grand. I get on federal probation. Of course, I give him the money back. But the problem is that my lawyer was like, I don't want money coming from you.
Sure.
You like, these guys are talking about bank fraud, wire fraud, all these frauds. Like,
Okay.
I can't
Yeah.
have you send me that money because I don't know. I'm like, no,
But dad's money is cool. Yeah.
my dad's money's cool. Then I can just pay
Right.
him back. So, yeah. So I ended up working out not knowing it at the time, but really a sweetheart deal. Like, they allowed me to continue. I lost my license, but they allowed me to continue to work in the industry as a consultant and continue to work in real estate. And
I'm shocked they let you do that. That's like the fox in the hen house, right?
it is, but the way what I ended up pleading guilty to was basically it was wire fraud. And there was no dollar loss, and there was no potential dollar loss. Essentially, I'd lied on an application. That's what it boiled down to.
Okay.
He lied on an application. He's given 3 years probation. So it sounds very benign. They knew what I'd done and what was happening at my mortgage company, but I refused at that time to cooperate. So without my cooperation, they've got nothing but one count of wire fraud.
Okay.
You lied on an application. Well, I did 3 times. And this is the other thing, is that those loans weren't even in my name. They were my wife's name.
Okay.
So, and I basically said, look, don't charge her, charge me. My lawyer worked out 1 count of wire fraud, 3 years probation. So now, yes, now I continue now I'm a felon. So now I felt like the gloves are off. Like I'm like any semblance of legitimacy is gone. So now I'm going to go ahead and just commit straight fraud.
Wow. So at one point in time, you had the Secret Service, U.S. Marshals, and the FBI hot on your trail. What were some of your closest misses with them?
Well, one, when I left, I got the heads up from a sheriff's deputy that I had done a bunch of loans for. He told me before they came to raid my office and arrest me, and I'm on federal probation. He came and told me that one of the women that was on the task force that had been investigating me, he used to date. So she shows up at his house at like 6 a.m. and says, listen, this guy, Matt Cox, or basically said that, look, I've been on a task force for the past 3 months. We've been investigating this guy in Tampa. And he's like, okay. She's like, your name came up because you've been dealing with him. He goes, who is it? He's like, Matt Cox. He goes, oh shit. She goes, he sold you several houses, not really him, but in the name of synthetic identities. So you seem connected to this whole thing. I'm letting you know we're about to hand over our task force findings to the FBI. They're going to come arrest this guy. He's going to cooperate. If I was you, I would not talk to him on the phone ever again. And because he's going to hem you up. Like, she's like, that's just what happens in these cases. Well, what he does is he comes to my office. He goes to work, gets off work, comes to this is like 4 o'clock, comes to my office and says, listen, man, he's like, here's what happened. 6 o'clock this morning, tells me what happened. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, look, I'm leaving. Like and he's like, they're going to come arrest you within a few days. And he was right. Like, I remember thinking I had the weekend. For some reason, I thought, well, they won't arrest me on a Saturday or Sunday. So, looking back, I'm like, well, that was stupid. You should have jumped in your car right then. But I got lucky. They didn't show up I left Sunday night. And this was like a Thursday. I left like Thursday night, ran up all my credit cards, pulled as much money out of the bank as possible, jumped in my car and left. And they showed up like 2-3 days later, they showed up. So that was a near miss. The other near miss was in Georgia. Went to Georgia, borrowed like roughly $400,000, rented somebody's house, satisfied the loans on the house, refinanced it 3 times, pulled out $400,000. And in that case, the Secret Service showed up at the house, 4 or 5 days, maybe a week after I'd left. And also almost got caught in a bank there. Well, I wasn't caught. I just got questioned really harshly by the cashing a check. But I managed to, I really, looking back, I'm shocked he didn't call the police. But this is the bank manager ended up letting me go. Like, he cashed the check, actually. I mean, he did everything he could to figure. He knew something was wrong, did all the verification he could, and still gave me a check for like 29 grand. I left. And then I got grabbed one time in a bank in South Carolina. I got grabbed in, I'm sorry. Yeah. In South Carolina, they handcuffed me and brought me down to the police station. And I convinced the detective that I had not broken the law. I hadn't done anything wrong. That possibly the loan officer at the bank, at multiple banks, had gotten together and they'd done something wrong. Maybe they'd done it on my behalf.
So you did some deflecting.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I'm not ready to take responsibility. So I completely spun the whole situation and got out of handcuffs, and they let me go. I got in my car.
Now, obviously you were
banks.
using a phony identity when that happened.
Oh yeah, they didn't know they had, like, at that time I was #1 on the Secret Service's most wanted list, but they didn't know they had me. They were calling me Gary Sullivan. So I was let go, left, and then about a week later, they tracked me back to North Carolina where I was retrieving a vehicle, and the U.S. Marshals were questioning the people in the leasing office. So they went to the leasing office and they were questioning them about me. And they were like, yeah, we haven't seen them, whatever. And then they walked across the street, went to a Starbucks, and I was at the Starbucks getting coffee. And so one of them races out, and I saw her leave too. And they're staring at me. They're like talking, and all I could think of was, it's less than the 5th or 6th of the month, and I hadn't paid rent because I'm leaving that whole area. I'm going to live somewhere else, so I'm not going to pay a $2,000 a month rent.
Right.
So I'm thinking this is about like an eviction. Like, they're freaking out because I haven't paid the rent. Like, maybe they're going to go get like a rental. Like, hey, here's your eviction. Here's your 3-day notice. I don't know. It wasn't until I get my coffee, I get in my car, start my car, and I'm basically about to leave. And the guy from the leasing office starts screaming, he's right here. He's right here. And there are 2 guys running towards the back of my car. And I just punched it and took off. At the time, I remember thinking it was FBI, but it wasn't until I got the Freedom of Information Act that I found out it was actually the U.S. Marshals.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know who it was. I used to,
You just know that it's time to get out of Dodge.
I just know these guys they looked very official, and it always, whenever I tell the story, it sounds super dramatic, right? Like, it sounds like a kind of a TJ Hooker. I ran and jumped over, slid across the top of the hood. Yeah. But the truth is, I had my seatbelt on. I started the car. I've got my coffee. I'm actually already checking to make sure there's no traffic. And this guy starts screaming, and I look in the rearview mirror and I go, oh, boom. And all I had to do was hit the pedal, boom, and left, but it sounds dramatic. It sounds like their fingers were just at the edge of the back of the car, And the thing is, had they actually run up to the car, like, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to punch it. If they ran up to the car and just grabbed the handle and opened the door, like, I'm getting out of the car. I'm not doing something stupid. Like, there's going to be some police officer holding onto the back of the car and I'm driving down the street.
Right.
Like, I'm not doing all that. Like, stop. I'm not. So, and so funny about that is that I raced down the street and I actually stopped at a homeless facility and surveyed 3 guys. It was like a mile down the street. I pull over. I see 3 homeless guys, 3 white homeless guys that looked like they were in their 30s. And I thought, this is a great opportunity. Let me pull over here. And I get out and I surveyed them.
For those who don't know, that is how you were stealing identities. You're going up to homeless people, and it's like, okay, he's not going to be driving or doing much
that was one
in
of
the near
ways.
future. So I'm going to get his social security number. I'm going to get all of his vital information. And now I'm going to become that dude.
Yeah, that was that was the best way to get identities, to get all valid identification, that was, foolproof. Like, that was the best way. Like, I was getting Social Security to issue Social Security numbers to like children that didn't exist. And I was able to get some documents using those Social Security numbers, but the homeless people were really just the best victims.
Well, you gave them $20. They're happy to get the 20, right?
I mean, yeah. What's so funny is I look back on that and I'm always walking around like rough areas with.
I'm surprised you didn't get rolled. Yeah, I didn't. Absolutely.
It wasn't until like later I started thinking, you know what? What I should have done was given like gift certificates, like $10 gift certificates, like to McDonald's, like here's two $10 gift certificates, like, but
Or
they
the
didn't
liquor store
question it.
nearby. That would do it too.
Yeah, they
Not to
didn't
be not to be mean-hearted, but that is how you're gonna win the hearts and minds. That's for sure.
What's
But
funny is how many of these people I think had just like were just mental illness.
oh,
You start talking to them for more than 2 or 3 minutes, you start realizing, oh wow.
we could do another podcast on that, but we won't right now. Jerry, could you explain how all these federal agencies would work together on this? You know, you had Secret Service, U.S. Marshals, FBI, or do they work that great together on something like this?
They work beautifully together. Almost every case that I worked when I was doing this work in the FBI, I was working with another federal agency. Usually it was the postal inspectors
Mm,
because so much was gone through the mail. I take it that changed nowadays. I mean,
right.
it was many, many years ago. But I worked a lot with the postal inspectors. I worked a lot with IRS because if I had, economic crime type charges, there's usually some type of tax violation.
Sure.
I didn't work with the Secret Service, but they do a lot of, currency and counterfeiting violations. So people on my squad worked with them. So absolutely, we work very well together on these type of fraud cases. The issue is, which is so much fun, is when you actually get to lay hands on somebody and handcuff them and make that arrest. That is such a high. It's like your validation of the hard work that you've done. And so once somebody becomes a fugitive and they're wanted, there's a race as to which of the agencies that have been working very well together gets to make the arrest, gets to find the fugitive, gets to, put the handcuffs on and take him into court. And so that becomes more of a competition. And it sounds like there were so many people,
I
looking for Matt that he had no
I was gonna
chance.
say it's funny because when I had actually called the FBI agent on my when I was on the run, Candace Calderon, when I called her,
Yeah,
I know
you were.
Candace.
Yeah, it was like Catch Me If You Can. It's like serial killers leaving little breadcrumbs for for the cops. It's like, look, I'm smarter than you. I'm gonna out.
well, I think, well, listen, I mean, you always hear everybody always says that their agent despised them. I genuinely think that Candace despised me. And what's funny is when I called her and I was kind of talking to her about possibly turning myself in, I didn't understand at the time. She was basically saying, like, come back to Tampa. And I was going, okay, well, keep in mind, I'm driving. I was driving through like Louisiana or something. I was like, and I'm in a U-Haul. So at this point, I was driving and I called her and she's like, come back to Tampa. We'll let you spend a couple hours with your mom and dad, your son, your ex-wife. Like, we'll make sure they're all there. When you show up, we let you spend a couple hours with them before I bring you in. Like, I know you got to miss them. She's telling me all these things. And I was like, okay, I get it. But honestly, my fear is, because at that point I'm driving with, I'm wanted. I have no ID. I have a driver's license that I know they're looking for in the name of a person that I know the FBI or everybody's looking for. And I was not even sure if I was going to make it all the way back to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I was going to pick up my vehicle. So I was like, look, to be honest with you, I'm closer to Atlanta. Like, why don't I just go to Atlanta and turn myself in? No, you have to come to Tampa. And I was like,
because she wanted credit for the arrest.
Right. But I didn't know that. And I was like, yeah, I know. I said, yeah, she's like, and that way you'll be able to see your family. And I was like, yeah, I get it, but I'm close. I said, my fear is that if I get caught between here and there, I'm going to have a problem. Like, I'm driving a vehicle that I'm thinking, if I drive this truck, what, I don't know that the police don't know that I'm even in this truck, or that they're not going to say, hey, that truck shouldn't be going, to Florida or whatever the case may be. I don't know. And I'm starting to freak out because I'm like, I don't want to get pulled over and get arrested by some local cop and blow the possibility of turning myself in.
Right.
But she kept insisting, no, you got to come to Tampa, got to come to Tampa. And I didn't realize till later that she wanted me to come to Tampa so that the FBI could, you know, have the arrest. It wasn't till later I realized that when I was talking to the Secret Service. She was like, "Oh no, no." And because even then, the Secret Service, when they arrested me, I was like, why didn't the marshals arrest me? You know, like they found out where I was, and they sort of like, really, the marshals should have arrested. They should have watched my house for 2 or 3 days. They should have arrested me, you know, but they didn't. Nope, forget the marshals. We're going to stake it out. We're going to arrest him.
Interesting. So let's change it up a little bit. You were on the run for how long? Like running, like actively running from the law?
Just shy of 3 years. It was basically 3 years.
That's a long ass time. Yeah, I'm thinking to myself, you know, you're going to do things to try to change your appearance. Yeah, you had 26 different identities, I believe is what I remember from the book. And
well,
you had how many plastic surgeries?
Yeah, I had like over 50 identities, but I had 26 driver's licenses issued by the issued by the state.
Yeah,
you know, these were like real driver's licenses. So I mean, it was 3 years. Like, I mean, I had plastic. The things I did were like, I had 2 hair grafts, right? So like, this isn't my hair. Well, it's my hair. It's my hair from the back of my head. So I actually have, when I get my hair cut, you can actually see the scars.
Also, they took hair from the back of your head and put it up top.
Yeah, they take the actual, like the little, they're like seeds, and they replant each individual seed.
All right, wait, I have to ask you a question though. Was that as a way to change your identity, or would you have done it anyway?
I don't think I ever would have done it had I not, like, it was an extra incentive. Like, was I happy? I was balding, you know, I wasn't happy about that.
I've embraced mine.
Yeah,
I've embraced my thinning hair and receding hairline.
You know, I was okay with it. Like, I never would have done it if I hadn't been on the run. Was it 100% the reason? No, but it definitely pushed me over the edge.
Yeah.
You know, same thing. I got a nose job. I got like a facelift. It's a mini facelift. So it wasn't the actual skin stretching, but they actually cut you here and behind the ears, and they suck all this, you know, out of your neck. So you have a better jawline. Like, I had a bunch of little procedures. I had my teeth done, liposuction.
And this was all during that 3-year period that you were.
This is all.
Obviously, you're just paying cash for all these procedures, right?
Yeah, yeah. This is all Bank of America money.
Okay.
So Jerri refuses to laugh at that. Yeah. I always say, when anybody ever asks me about plastic surgery, I'm like, look, best Bank of America money I ever spent.
So besides being morally flexible, greed, lack of empathy, what traits make a good con artist, do you think?
I mean, I think all those are, you know, I think Jerri and I talked about this. Like, you know, there's I forget what they call it. It's like I think anybody under the right circumstances will commit some kind of fraud. Like, there's 3 things.
We talked about the fraud triangle.
That's it.
Oh, okay. There's a triangle. I did not know this.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. It's
want me to talk about it again?
Sure, a little
bit.
And then
Matt can tell you how he fits.
This will make a great short.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. The fraud triangle is a definition of how that particular fraud or how that particular person became a fraudster. First of all, you look for opportunity. Did they have opportunity to commit this fraud? The second one is it called purpose?
Necessity.
Oh, pressure. What was it that was happening in their lives that pressured them into making that decision to commit a fraud? And then the third one is the rationalization. What were they able to say to themselves that made it okay for them to commit the fraud? So the triangle for a person to consider doing a fraud: opportunity, pressure, and rationalization. And so Matt explained what his was when I was on his show, and I think it's fascinating.
Is that where I jump in?
Yeah.
Sure. Jump right in.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, at that moment, it was that I think, well, one, obviously I owned and operated a mortgage company. So I had extreme inside knowledge and access, right? And I knew the system, the weaknesses in the system. And then the other thing was, I needed the money. So I definitely, used that as an excuse. And I think that was kind of a combination of two things. One, I used that I needed the money, and that was like the pressure that to get to do it. And the second one is that I honestly had been doing everything correctly. Like, you've done everything correctly your whole life, and it's not working. So, and initially when I did it, it was for my, I told myself this is a single mother. She needs to get into a house. I'm doing her a favor. She's going to pay.
That's your rationalization.
Yeah, I'm helping her. So, I think that gave me, that definitely, those are my kind of three things.
Okay.
And then it just grew from there. Every single, once you've done it a few times, I don't need to rationalize it anymore. This is just what I'm doing.
Okay.
I'm just going to get these things to go through, and it's fine. And then when it doesn't come back on you, or it does come back on you and you get yourself out of it, you become emboldened by it, and all of those things kind of go away. You don't need those excuses to push you over the edge anymore.
All right. Let's talk about accomplices. Now, you used women as accomplices. What qualities or traits were you looking
Stop
for?
reading Wikipedia.
I'm sorry,
guy,
what?
Huh?
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
I said, stop reading Wikipedia. This guy, what's funny about that? Like, none of that. Like, this guy, Jeff Testerman, wrote 35 articles on me. Never once mentioned anything about female accomplices, nothing. And keep in mind, if you look at my 15 unnamed co-conspirators, like less than half of them are women. Most of them are men. Let me tell you who came up with that.
One of your exes?
No, Dateline NBC.
Okay.
They were looking for a hook. Like this guy committing fraud and being on the run isn't sexy enough. At that time, 20 years ago, you know what the big buzzword was? Single mothers. Everything was about single mothers. There was a time there, 4 or 5 years, where everything was like protecting single mothers and poor single mothers and helping single mothers. And so they came out with this whole thing. He's victimizing single mothers.
You're exploiting single mothers.
Yes, I'm exploiting them. Sorry, you're right. I'm exploiting them. I'm turning them into, criminals. And the truth is, it's like, okay. So, and then they actually had, so the person that also jumped onto that was one of my co-defendants. Her name is Rebecca Hauk. She ended up getting the lawyer for, this was a lawyer. God, you see her all the time. I forget her name. It was in the book, but basically she worked for like the Johnny Cochran law firm. Like, she's one of these like, she does all the sensational cases. And so she took on her case, and she started screaming she's a single mother. This guy convinced her to fall in love with him, convinced her to commit fraud, convinced her to go on the run, leave her children, do all these things that like never happened. And then, he specifically targets single mothers. It's like, if you're in your 30s, 20 years ago, if you were in your 30s, you couldn't date without the woman having a child. Right. They all had children. So,
because I think there was an article or a reporter that was calling you guys like Bonnie and Clyde.
Right. That was Bonnie and Clyde. I think that's what they turned it into for. American Greed, I think, called it that.
Yeah.
The one prior to that, they were Dateline was calling it the Thief of Hearts.
That's what it was. Yeah, the Thief of Hearts. Now, like, Jerri, what kind of experience do you have with this?
I would say not very often. Usually the person involved was just a girlfriend. I mean,
right.
even fraudsters, need love, so somebody was
You can't
there,
stop
but
love, okay?
right. And I talked about that one case where of the drug dealer and the mortgage flipping, and his girlfriend was the realtor, but she was a realtor. I mean,
Right.
she knew it
Sure.
was going on, but she looked at herself as just doing the real estate transaction. So in most cases, I mean, the person that I was investigating was usually a male. I think I only had, of all the cases I ever investigated, I think I only had one woman who was a subject,
Hmm.
and she was all in it by herself. She totally was embezzling from the bank that she worked for. She was a manager, but no, I don't see a lot of women uh, being participants in the fraud. They were just in love with the person that was committing the crime.
Gotcha. Well, what jumped out at me, Matt, was I think it was Rebecca and maybe another woman, was they became the victim once they got caught. They were enjoying the Rolexes, the trip to Switzerland or the Caribbean, and let's go on a $50,000 shopping spree. Hey, I need this plastic surgery. I need
All right.
to spend $500 a month on my nails. Just stuff that like normal people will be like, what? No. There's a price tag with that. And ultimately you're gonna pay it. So
Right. Well, and I get them blaming me. Like, I understand, like, listen, you're trying to get out of the
right,
system.
absolutely. It's
You're trying, like,
self-preservation.
and their lawyers telling them this is the way to do it.
Sure, sure.
You know what's so funny about that is that when I got back, I spoke with Becky. Like, we were talking through was it Messenger or Instagram? I don't know, one of those two. Like, when I was in the halfway house, and even when I got out of the halfway house, and we were going back and forth talking. She's remarried, met a guy in the halfway house, married him.
Okay.
Just like I met my wife in the halfway house, married her.
Okay.
So she met this guy. They have a baby. Or babies. He's a little boy now. Adorable. Her son's in the military. Like, we're going back and forth, back
Yeah.
and forth. And so at some point she started saying, wow, I wish you all the luck. I think you're going to be great. I think this. And she's going on. And I said, she's like, if I can ever do anything to help you, I said, you know what you could do? I said, you could go on this podcast, like that I go on. Everyone, I said, go on the podcast with me. I said, and you could let them know that I said, I never took advantage of you and you begged to come with me. I said, instead of what you spewed out to the newspaper reporters in the court.
Right.
And she said, oh, hell no. She said, I've been telling that story. She said to my husband, she said, ever since the halfway house, she said, and my parents, she said, I'm not going to reverse gears now.
Yeah, probably
And
not a good idea.
I thought, oh my God. And then I had the text.
Ooh,
So I was
yeah.
showing to you. I'm like,
Matt's vindicated. Look at this.
and she stopped. I went on Bubba the Love Sponge. Do you know Bubba the Love Sponge is? He's a like a radio show here. And I went on Bubba the Love Sponge and we were talking about her and what the whole thing. And I'm like pulling up the stuff and everything and showing, and we're laughing about it. And her husband was listening.
Did he call in?
No, but she started texting me and it was live. So she's texting me and I go, oh my gosh, this is her right here. And her husband's hearing it.
No.
And she's saying, stop. Oh, you know what it was? I called her.
Oh, is that funny?
The guy, Bubba, was saying, well, she's pretty hot. Like, you like him? I go, yeah. I said, I've always been kind of attracted to white trash, joking around. And her text was, stop calling me white trash. I said, there's a lot of trailer parks in Florida. You know how it is. So I'm joking. It's a whole joking show. And, and we're laughing and everything. She starts saying all this. So then when I say, hey, this is her right here. After that, I got a text that said, listen, I'm done talking to you. Like, I had no idea. My husband heard the whole thing. I got all kinds of explaining to do. I can't talk to you anymore. I was like, oh, I understand. I get it. You got a life.
Funny. So I would think to be a good con man, you would have to be very good at reading people. Obviously.
Oh, I never answered that. I said
yeah,
that.
you were good at it. What clues would people give you that you would think, well, this is kind of an easy mark?
Well, I told you the thing with my dad, right? I put that in the book, right? Where
right.
I said my dad always said, he's like, you're what did he say? He said the secret of sales is sincerity. If you can fake that, you've got it made. He goes, and you got that in spades. He said you can definitely fake it. He said you'll always be be able to do sales. So that was one thing. I've always been, you know, very I have good intuition.
Okay.
You know, like, not that you would know it. Does that make sense? Like, I could be having a conversation with you and realize, like, 5 minutes in the conversation, like, wow, this person really despises me. But I would never show you, like, I would never show my hand. I would still be polite and nice and joke around. And I've had lunch with people that I disliked and I knew disliked me, or that, you know, really, and I just don't tend to show my hand. Right.
Okay.
You know, one thing, you never know who you're going to need.
Yeah, that's a true
So,
story. Don't burn those
you know,
bridges.
you know, and so there's no benefit to creating enemies and talking bad about people, and there's no benefit.
So Jerry, I mean, the opposite end, you were working with people who got scammed or conned, etc. Was there a pattern? Did you see, like, okay, this person was X, Y, or Z?
Desperate. This
Okay.
person was desperate. And I think, you know, con artists smell desperation and grab a hold of it. So, you know, if you're a lot of the things I did were advanced fee schemes where basically a business person, you know, they had a business or a company and they needed funding. You know, they were having some financial issues and they needed some extra capital to keep their business going, because if they didn't get it, their business was going to fail. They're desperate. And so they find a loan broker who says, I know you can't get a loan from a traditional bank, but I have opportunities that have for people with money, financiers, and I'm going to broker a deal for you to get you, you know, the loan that you need. But to do my work, I need an advance fee, and you
Sure,
need to
sure.
pay an advance fee. And these people were so desperate that even though they didn't have any money, they found the money to pay this advance fee because of the hope that they were finally going to get this loan that they needed. That desperation allowed them to not see the red flags or
Mm.
hear the bells and the whistles going
Yeah.
off, that this person is not going to get me my money. And so it really was, this is kind of strange to say, but I enjoyed working fraud cases so much because I knew that I was having an opportunity to stop somebody from exploiting. We use that word,
Okay.
exploiting someone's desperation.
Mm.
And so that's really what I got from the victims. These were people, in most cases, who were desperate. In some cases, they were just as greedy as the con men. You know, they thought that they were going to have an opportunity to make money. And, you know, they didn't do their due diligence. They didn't check things out because all they were thinking about was the money that they were going to make from this investment, which was basically a scam.
Right.
So it was interesting.
So Matt, what were some of your highest and lowest moments during all of this?
No, I mean, this is, I mean, I think this is pretty obvious, but, you know, getting 26 years, you know, that was, it wasn't even so much the 20, it was the 26 years was bad, but it was, once it really started sinking in that you're going to do 26 years. Like, initially when I got it, I thought, well, I'm going to get my sentence reduced. You know, I'm going to cooperate. They're going to arrest these people and they're going to reduce my sentence. But after a couple of years, you realize, oh, that's not happening. You know, the entire economy was melting down in 2008, and they're
Right.
not looking into cases that are 5 years old.
Mm.
So, you know, that was a bad situation. That, and, you know, my father died when I was in prison. You know, my mother came to see me every 2 weeks for the entire time I was, with the entire time I was locked up. The only time she missed a few times was when she had a stroke. So then she couldn't come. And even then when she's in a wheelchair.
Wow.
And she's saying, hey, I have to go see, Matthew on Wednesday. And, my brother and sister are like, Mom, you're in a wheelchair. And, it's such a pain to get in there. Are you sure you're up to it? And you get so tired. And she's like, well, then I'll sleep in the car on the way there. And I'm in the chair. I'll sleep in the chair if I get tired.
Wow.
And they're like, yeah, but it takes so long. She's like, well, I'm sitting down already. Like, it's fine. I mean, she just, my mom, listen, gangster. So she, yeah, she can. So, but, that was horrible.
Sure.
Sitting in prison, having your mother visit you in prison.
Yeah.
Like that's, like, how much more of a shit of a son can you be?
Right.
Now she has to drag herself up to come see me. So, that was bad. I have a son that doesn't talk to me, which, and I did all the things that people say you're supposed to do. When I sent the letters, I drew pictures, I called when all this while I was locked up. But by the time I got arrested, there have been programs and I'm in the news all the time and I'm in the newspapers, and it couldn't have been easy for him as a little,
Oh yeah.
7-8-year-old boy. Your daddy is a bad person. And it's not like he can say, no, it's a misunderstanding. No,
Sure.
your dad is a bad person. So, and then I get this massive prison sentence. And then by the time his mother came around and like wanted to bring him, he didn't want to come, and even to this day, I get out of prison and he doesn't want to talk to me. And, and he's got a good case. Like, he doesn't have a bad case. Like,
right.
Like, if you were advising him, you would say, yeah, you probably don't want to be a part of this guy's life. He's not a good person. Even though what's funny about that is that his mom begs him to talk to me. His stepfather, well, really, which is really his father. He was adopted when I was in prison.
Yeah.
So his father has come to see me in prison. His father has told him, you need to be a part of this guy's life. What are you doing? This is not a bad guy. Disagrees. He's like, I disagree. I don't want to be a part of his life. So, there are really, really, other than just that massive sentence, which I got lucky that I got out of, but other than that, there are these, horrendous things that, and that happened in my life. And the worst part of those things that happened to me is that I brought them all on myself. Like, I can't even blame, I can't blame Jerri. I can't blame you. I can't blame the courts. I can't blame my, my public defender or the prosecutor. It's like, okay, well, what did you think was going to happen?
Right.
Like, what did you like, oh, I never thought it was going to be bad. And I never thought I could get 26 years. I didn't think you could kill someone and get 26 years. But, so I didn't see that massive of a sentence coming, but that's really irrelevant.
So during
You
these
put yourself
horrible low times, did you turn to God or religion, or did you push away from it? Or
there.
was
No,
that
I
even a
would
factor?
say, no, I would say it's a semi factor. Like, I didn't think God's going to get me out, but I
Right.
think that I think the belief in God is extremely comforting. Whether that's because, it's true or not, I don't know. What I know is that, my wife and I go to, well, actually, we didn't go a lot. Like, what we probably go twice a month, sometimes 3 times a month, but things happen. So,
Sure.
we go to church, and she is very, very much religious, somebody who believes in the Bible. This
Mhm.
is what it says, and that's what happened. And I have a little bit more loosey goosey, feeling about the whole situation. But I believe that, I definitely believe that there's a higher power, and it's comforting to think of that. And if that's
Well,
maybe that's what it is, and if that's what gets you through it, then that's what gets you through it. I mean, hope
yeah,
is what gets you through
there's the
those
old
things.
saying, there's no atheists in foxholes. The
Right.
worse,
Right.
life gets, what I have seen, and I've seen some horrible, horrible stuff, and I've talked to, and that's cops, that's victims of crimes, and that's criminals. It's either they gravitate towards some kind of religion or God, or they just curse it. And it's like, how did you do this to me? You've forsaken me.
Yeah,
So
but
it's kind of extreme on both ends.
I was gonna say, but I can't do that. I'm a very analytical person, and I see things for what they are, and I put myself in this situation.
Okay.
I'm in exactly the spot that I put myself in.
Good.
So, if anything, I was given all the opportunities
Sure.
that I should have been given. And, and I took not all the wrong moves, but not all the wrong choices, but enough to get myself in a bad spot.
Right.
You
Now,
know,
when you got out of prison, what was the first thing you did?
when I was in the halfway house?
Or even like out of the halfway house, it's like, what did you miss the most that it's like, okay, I got to go to Chick-fil-A. I need those nuggets, man. I haven't seen those in 13 years.
It's funny. Everybody, these guys, they talk to me in prison and I obviously put off a vibe. And when people would say, what are you going to do when you get out? What's the first meal what are you going to eat? What are you going to eat? And, it was always, I wanted a McDonald's cheeseburger, not a big one, the little cheeseburger, I want a McDonald's cheeseburger. And I wanted, pistachio ice cream. And they were like, man, you don't want, you don't want a lobster. You don't want this. Like, no, like, you have the wrong impression of me. No, I don't want a steak. No, I don't want I want a McDonald's hamburger. I want a fountain Coke, and I want pistachio heaven ice cream, which they don't even make anymore on Ben Jerry's, but they still do make pistachio, which is still pretty good. So, and so that's pretty much, what I went for.
Okay.
I have a big question for you, a mystery to solve. Did they have the fountain sodas at the low when you got there?
No, keep in mind, after 2 months at the medium, they took them out. Because when they went to the national menu, you're getting like,
you don't even get the fountain soda?
no.
Oh, you really did serve hard. Yeah.
It was rough. Because I remember thinking, at least they have fountain soda. Well, you're wrong about that.
2 months and then they yanked it
Gone.
away from you.
Oh yeah. And then when you went to breakfast, it was like you got 2 hard-boiled eggs. Remember where before it was like bacon, scrambled egg, 2 hard-boiled eggs. Here you go.
Yikes. Oh, so as a part of you getting an early release, you did some consulting with businesses on what to look for in scams and fraud, kind of what you were doing. Have you consulted with law enforcement?
I mean, I wrote an ethics and fraud course, and I was interviewed by 2 programs to get 1 reduction, 1 sentence reduction. It was like 7 years. And the second one, I cooperated against a guy that was in prison for a Ponzi scheme. And that was my second reduction. So I got 12 years knocked off. Since then, since I got out, I do speaking engagements. So I go to like credit unions, there are a lot of them are part of these associations. So I'll speak with the Northwest Association of Credit Unions, and I'll go up there, and they pay everybody I talk to that does things that they don't pay much. I'm thrilled. Like whatever, you'll pay $3,500, $5,500, $8,500, like, to have me come in, speak in front of a couple hundred people, answer questions. I speak for 45 minutes to an hour. I answer 15, 20 minutes worth of questions. And, but it's not so much consulting as it is me telling my story. The things that I did. And it depends on who I'm talking in front of. Like, what's their focus? Is their focus on hacking, and I'm at a cybercrime convention? Then I talk about what I did, which most hacking is social engineering, and how I socially engineered my way into, creating different identities and getting the banks to lend me money and getting access to accounts and that sort of thing. So I'll focus it there. If it's talking to a credit union, I might talk about red flags, like how many times a loan officer actually saw the red flags and ignored them. Or maybe if it's a banking convention or something, maybe I'll talk about, how easy the access was for me to get certain types of controlled software, like appraisal software, that sort of thing. And, so I gear them towards who I'm talking to, but it's still basically the same basic story that I tell for 45 minutes to an hour. And, You know, and listen, it's great. It's good money, and I love doing it because I love talking in front of people in the industry because you don't have to explain.
Oh, okay,
Like
sure.
I shave off
You know the
20.
lingo. Yeah, you know
Yeah,
the
they know
lingo.
the minute. You shave off 20 minutes of having to explain why. When I say, hey, I whited out this, or I changed that, or I to fix their DTI, you should see it. The average person is looking at me like, I don't understand.
Evil.
Yeah. When I say, oh, I did this to get around seasoning, nobody knows what seasoning is.
So, Jerry, you know, a common trope that you see in movies and TV is, you know, the criminal mastermind that's already in prison or is out of prison, and the FBI agent seeking that person out for like advice or consulting. That doesn't happen, does it?
No, because basically the reason that the person was caught is that we figured out what they were doing. And so,
Right.
you know, we know what they're doing. But, you know, I had a lot of really good, I don't want to call them relationships, but, you know, experiences with the people that, you know, I investigated and arrested. Um, Matt is really, you know, a typical con person, very friendly, very nice to be around. Um, Cooperating. He is the person that I was investigating. I
Okay.
mean, I don't know if there's a type, but you know, definitely I got along well, which is why I was very surprised that the FBI agent that investigated him just did not see how, you know, adorable you are, Matt. Does not like that. And I
Awesome.
say that because I actually reached out to her because, you know, on my podcast, I interview retired FBI agents, but if they want to bring on their, you know, a subject or a victim or a law enforcement partner, then I like to do that. So when I met Matt, I was like, oh, this is exciting. I'm going to get him to come on the show. I'm going to get Candace to come on
Yeah.
the show and bring Matt. And Candace did not agree with that.
Do you
Oh,
remember? I told you when we talked, I said, she's not going to do it. She's not going to do it.
No, I really can see, especially in Matt's case, uh, that you know he's made that change. That he has changed his life. He has accepted responsibility, and so, you know, I'm good with Matt, you know, as
okay.
long as he's accepting responsibility and not trying to, you know, teach people how to scam other people, then I'm good with him. And, you know, I can sit down and talk to him when we met for the first time at CrimeCon. I knew, yeah, this is, you know, I'm going to do this show. Um, so, but I don't need, like in the TV show White Collar, I don't need to, you know, have a criminal show me the ways because
Right.
there's so many case studies that I already know the different things that you can do in order to scam somebody. So I don't need anybody showing me the way.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I was going to say, I've had, the Hillsborough County put together a bunch of, um, economic investigators or detectives from surrounding counties, and I've gone there twice and spoken. But once again, I'm not, you know, I'm just telling my story
Mhm.
because they've had a rash of title fraud, and so I kind of explained my story and how I did these things, and just so that they could kind of understand, you know, not that they, but let's face it, that's not a normal thing. So, you know, they wanted to hear like, look, it could be anybody. And here's how easy it was. Not that it was necessarily easy, but it is easy. It's easier now than it was when I was doing it.
All right.
And so they're doing those things. So I've done that a couple of times. I think that's what you initially were asking about, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've done that, but I've never like sat down, like, here's how you catch them. Like,
Oh,
here's,
okay.
you
No
know,
Hannibal
let me
Lecter
look at
thing. Yeah. Okay.
bring me the file. Let me look.
Okay.
Oh yeah, here it is.
Yeah.
Here's the
Bum, bum,
smoking gun. Here's
bum.
the
That's
key.
right.
What is it? It's the teller at the bank. That's from Catch Me If You Can. He
That's
immediately says
right.
it's a teller.
Yep.
Why? Oh, it's a stamp. Well, they use the stamp over and over again.
That's funny. So, Matthew and Jerry, what can people do to protect themselves from ID theft or other frauds or scams, just generally? Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't give out your social security number to like Joe Schmo or whatever, but what kind of jumps out at you? What would you see?
I would say do your due diligence. Do not depend on what other people have told you about a particular investment or opportunity. Do your own research because it gets to the point that maybe the first one or two people bought into the scam, did no research, and then anybody after that, it's just the social proof that they're going on. He invested and he got some money back. And so nobody ever does the due diligence, which if you just looked it up and saw that this company that says it's this great investment, doesn't have any money in their account or doesn't even have an account or
So do you
doesn't have
like
an office
do
or
you Google them and like put in, like Acme, whatever company scam and
right.
Google it that way, or
And
Better
then
Business
it
Bureau
probably will
or
pop right out, warning, do not invest in this. But nobody ever does that because their best friend made money off of it.
Mm,
So I'm just going to go on the fact that they made money and
Yeah.
I'm
But
going to
the truth,
invest too.
I was gonna say, but the truth is he's actually lost money. He just doesn't know it yet.
Yeah.
Your best friend's actually lost all that money. He just doesn't know it yet.
or pride is involved with that too. Sometimes people exaggerate. It's like, yeah, I made $10,000 and they actually made 100,
Right.
or they broke even, or they lost.
So Matt,
Um,
what's your warning?
well, I
Yeah.
think it was identity theft. The identity theft thing, I think that like on all my credit cards, I have the notifications where every time it's used, it notifies me, hey, your credit card was just used. Every time my credit is pulled, it notifies me, hey, these people just pulled your credit. So you can, I have those notifications. I check my accounts constantly. So
Okay.
I think that it is for credit card or for identity theft, it is checking your documents constantly, checking your credit cards constantly. If you just stay, I don't think there's any way, because your information's out there. There's no way to say, oh, I'm going to secure my information. Okay, well, when you go to the doctor and they ask for your social security number,
Right.
you're going to tell them no. Oh, so we can't see you then. Okay, well, then what do? Like you're going to have to give out your social security number, some of your information. It's going to get out there. It's already out there somewhere. But if someone pulls your credit, you see that, hey, this bank pulled my credit, and you didn't pull, then you start making phone calls. I did not do that. Here's who I am. You go
Sure.
and you report it. Like start that process. It blowing it off or thinking, oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. That's not, like, nobody's looking out for you. But you really have to be your own advocate. And I think most people aren't. They think, oh, that won't happen to me, or I don't want to have to make all those phone calls, or they said they called me back and they didn't. I tried. Well, you need to try harder. So you maybe make some more calls. So, I think that's what has to be done, because there's just no way. There's no 100% safeguard.
Sure. Now, how often do you think a person should pull their own credit bureau, or should they?
Well, I mean, you can do it for free once a year.
Right. So once a year, you think you should do like a checkup?
Yeah. Well, here's what I think you should do is most bank accounts have a notification where every time, it's not so much pulling your credit. Like I do that probably once a year. My big thing is when people inquire into your credit. That means somebody's trying to borrow in your name. Someone's looking at you. Why? Like, so you get notified, hey, Suncoast Credit Union just pulled your credit. Why? I didn't apply for anything with Suncoast Credit Union.
Sure.
They didn't do it on their own. They don't have the right to do it on their own. So that's a phone call. That's at least a few phone calls. Why did you inquire? And they'll put you in contact with their fraud department. Like, that's a serious issue. They'll come back and they'll say, wow, is this you? No, it's not me. So they'll say, yeah, somebody applied for a mortgage in your name, or a personal loan, or a credit card, and if think about how that looks now. If 6 months later you say, hey, that wasn't me. Well, you were notified 6 months ago. You did nothing. Now try and fix it. Now you owe them $20,000. Now you think you got a problem when they
now
acquire.
That's a mess. Yeah.
Now it's a mess. Exactly.
So nip it in the bud. Now, earlier you were talking about not repairing or improving your credit score, but legally, what are some ways to do that?
I mean, I think it's so funny because I talked to somebody the other day who was like a grown man and just had no idea anything about credit. Like,
Yeah.
so, you want to keep your balances. I mean, obviously you want to keep them as low as possible.
Yeah, there's common
Or-
sense stuff like pay off your
yeah,
credit cards, that kind
yeah.
of thing.
Well, not even 30% or under. You want to have
Okay.
about 70-80% capacity, borrowing capacity.
Okay.
You don't want 10 credit cards. You want maybe 3 or 4. You want a car. The optimum person, borrower is somebody who's got 3 credit cards, a car loan, and a mortgage. That's
Okay.
really exactly what the bank's looking for. They don't want you to have 10. They don't want you to have, they don't want to have 3 car loans, 7 credit cards. That doesn't make sense. Like, so you want 3 or 4 credit cards with the balances all below, if not paid off, at least below 30%. And you want to have maybe a car loan, unless the car's been paid off. And then you want to have some kind of a mortgage. Like, that's really the best kind of situation. And obviously you want to pay all your bills have to be paid on time. So, I used to love these guys that I would pull their credit and I'd see they'd be 6 months behind on their credit card, or they'd have collections and they'd say something like, well, my payment was a couple days late and they jacked my rate up to 25%. And so I stopped paying them on principal. Stop. If you'd read that thing, you knew if you paid it late, it wasn't going to stay 12%. It was going to jump up to 26 or 28%. And if you had principal, then you just pay the entire thing off. Like, don't try and justify your bad behavior. And do you really think that somebody at Bank of America is laying up at night thinking, you know what, Jerri Williams did not pay her credit card? I can't sleep. It's upsetting me so much. Like, you're just a cog in the wheel.
What we did to her. Oh.
Yeah, you're not hurting anybody but yourself. So work on paying it off. Like, don't.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about your author career and your podcast. You wrote Shark in the Housing Pool. Why did you write that book?
Because everybody that heard my story, because I'd been on Dateline and American Greed, I'd been in Fortune, I'd been in all these magazines, and everybody kept telling me that I needed that, and then they'd hear my story and they'd say, man, you got to write a book. You got to write a book. So it took a few years before I finally realized that, that I should probably write a book. And initially I was so just, first few years, all I'm doing is reading, and I read a lot of true crime.
Mm-hmm.
So I started thinking I could probably write my own book. So I started writing my book, and that probably took over a year or so. And I had to rewrite it a few times. I got a literary agent. He read the book and came back and was like, yeah, you got to rewrite this. So he went through and showed me places to rewrite and sent me a couple of books on how to write nonfiction and, and true crime. So I read those books, and then I rewrote my book. And then after that, I realized I really liked writing. And I realized that I was just surrounded by these guys that had these amazing stories.
Yeah.
They were never going to tell them. Like, they couldn't write it themselves. And I don't mean because they weren't capable, but they couldn't because it's so difficult to write your story. Because you don't see yourself how you really are. You have a version of yourself that's just not true. And so I think that helped me learn a lot. During the wow. Can you hold on a second?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Don't mess with his money. Okay, Pat.
Yeah.
So I rewrote that book, and I felt like I learned a lot, writing about myself and, pinpointing certain spots in your life that helped create the person that you are.
Right.
And the things that you did. So then I started writing other guys' stories. And, because they came to me and they were like, look, I read your book, or my friend read your book, would you write my book, and that sort of thing. So I ended up writing a book for a guy named Ephraim Deveroli. And he is one of the characters in a movie called War Dogs. So I wrote his memoir while he was in prison, and it was called Once a Gun Runner. And then one of the guys in his unit had seen me with him, and realized I was writing his book. And he came to me and pled with me to write his story.
Sure.
And so I got him into, I remember I said, you don't really have much of a story.
No one
But
wants to hear that.
well, I mean, you're doctor shopping, but he
Sure.
did have, it was, it was kind of cool. And I didn't think it was I was thinking big stories, big in the news and this and that. I wasn't in the right frame of mind, but I thought it's kind of cool. You got this going. It's a bunch of clean cut kids that were on the wrestling team that were doctor shopping in high school. And then when they went off and got scholarships, some of them stayed in Florida and continued that and was shipping pills up to the colleges. And, so it's like kind of cool. And they had some little adventures and, there's some double crossing and twists and turns. So I said, look, if I can get you some media attention, then I'll write your book. And I ended up getting him in Rolling Stone magazine. So I convinced the reporter to write an article. He actually didn't write the article. He just took what I sent him and put his name on it, pretty much. Rewrote about 5% of it. So, which irritates the hell out of me. But the point is that, my name initially was supposed to be on the article with him. And then at last minute, he dropped me from the article.
Ooh, that's
and
rough.
I eventually ended up talking to the editor, and he told me, your name was never on the article.
Wow.
So
That's tough.
He just put me in the article. But when they sold the life rights, I got a portion of his life rights.
Oh.
So, I got a check for that. And then I ended up getting a book deal. I wrote the book, got a book deal for him. It was in Barnes and Nobles, all the bookstores. Got an advance for that. So then I wrote another kid's book. Great book. I've optioned his life rights. I ended up writing like 5 more books. Like I ended up writing like 6 or 7 books. A couple of them I finished when I was out.
Are these all self-published, or did you go through a traditional
two
publisher?
of them I got published through publishers while I was incarcerated.
Okay.
I had no way to really do anything while I was locked up. I couldn't self-publish locked up. So, but when I got out, I realized that, I was just going to make so much more money self-publishing.
Oh, all day long.
Because I was thinking, unless you have a bestseller, you're just
Right.
not going to make a ton of money. The difference between those two is so massive.
Sure is.
Your bestseller, great. You might make $500,000, $1 million or something. Maybe. If not, then you're getting a check for $72 twice a year.
Right.
After your advance.
Exactly.
So,
You're getting, if you're going through a traditional publishing house and it's like maybe medium or kind of lower, even higher, I guess, you're getting 30% of those royalties. Sometimes it's less than that.
Right.
And like what you're saying, you'll get a check like every 6 months for $50-$60 or something like that.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. Whereas if you're self-published, you're going to be doing some of the work, which is fine. There's ways around it, and you're going to wind up doing the work anyways if you're go traditionally, unless you're Stephen King or James Patterson or something like that. You're going to be doing the lion's share of the marketing. You're going to be doing a lot of work. You're going to have to roll up your sleeves and market this thing. You're looking at, like I said before, 70%, if you publish it yourself. If you don't, then you're looking at 20-30%. The math is there.
Right.
So what's the next book? Any more in your future?
Well, I've written, I wrote a few of them, and some of them I finished when I got out. You know how it is. Like you're always working with this
Absolutely.
producer, that producer. I'm always getting close to a deal, and then they fall apart or whatever. And that's been going on since I got out of prison. It's, I've been close multiple times. I don't want to bore you because it'd be another 20 minutes of close. Just
well, I was a co-host on a podcast with JD Barker, and he's, top tier author, and he's had, I don't know how many books optioned for movies. They option them. They were actually on a set. They're ready to roll. They had the actors, they had everything going. Somebody from the like Apple or Prime or wherever, some big executive comes in and is like, no, we're not doing it. Pack up. It isn't real until it's like on the screen.
Yeah.
Until then, it ain't real.
Listen, I had a deal worked out with Blumhouse. I was supposed to fly out there and meet everybody and the whole thing, and then COVID hit. I mean, I've had it's been one disaster after another. And honestly, in the last year or two, I haven't even pushed. Like I don't even try. But I've optioned since then. I do option books
Sure.
every once in a while. I'll option this story. I'll option that story, and sometimes they expire, and sometimes they I've had one that has been re-optioned 4 different times. Does that and it's great. That's a little check. You get $7,000-8,000
Absolutely.
and I never expect it. It's
Yep.
always just ends up in the mail, and I'm always like,
Yay.
I can.
Money's good. So, going back to Shark and the housing pool, I got the audio version. I absolutely loved it. I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed reading it. It's a good book. It's put together well. The narrator did a fantastic job. I'm a huge fan of audio. We were talking about that, before I
Right.
hit record.
And me too. I only do audiobooks. It's a time saver. Mhm.
Absolutely. Going to the gym, driving from here to there, whatever. It's like, having a podcast, you want to try to read your guest book if they have one, or at least go through it. And this makes it a lot more attainable than just like sitting at your desk or your recliner for hours. Just again, the dyslexia thing, all that, it just makes it so much easier. So, speaking of your podcast, it's on YouTube. And it's also on the regular podcast platforms. Matthew Cox, Inside True Crime. On YouTube, you have, I think it's 200,000 subscribers.
It's like by the time this comes out, it'll be 180. It's almost 180 now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You're
But
right around 200,000. According to Listen Notes, your podcast is in the top 1.5% of all podcasts. Like all podcasts.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
I'm not even
Jerri,
sure what
I
that
think
means.
Jerry's is too. Like, like Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan, they're like 0.02%.
Mhm.
You're 1.5%.
Me?
Yeah. Actually, both you guys are.
I mean,
You're right in that area.
Yeah, I think I'm a point something percent.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah.
You're doing even better. Good for you. I thought I was right around there, but you're seeing a lot of success with this. How are you marketing this? I mean, what's your secret sauce for the podcast?
I just go on people's, I go on people's podcasts. I tell my story. I've done a few, kind of like true crime documentary episodes where they'll do like an episode on me. That might help. I don't think it's any one place. I've never advertised or anything. But I did do, when I first got out, I did several podcasts that got several million views. And I think that has helped. Although at the time I didn't have a podcast, but there's still, there's enough out there. I think you just have to kind of you go on the podcast that will accept you. You tell your story, you get your name out there. I mean, this may get me 5 subscribers. It may get me 500. But the great thing about it is that if you just keep putting out the material and keep talking about it, keep pushing it out there, and your podcast is monetized and you do good interviews and you put out good content, then I think ultimately it grows and grows. And then at one point you turn around and you go, oh my God, this is paying all my bills.
So how many episodes do you do a week?
So I schedule about 7 interviews a week, but 3 of them fall apart.
Okay.
You keep in mind who I'm dealing with.
Okay.
I'm dealing with guys that are in and out of prison, or maybe even if they turn their life around, they're not used to a schedule.
Okay.
So I do about, I get at least 4 a week. We probably got about 2 weeks. We're probably a week or 2 behind.
Yeah.
And so we have that in the.
It's nice to have a little cushion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It really is.
And then so we release 4 a week.
Okay. When did you start podcasting?
Almost 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Okay, great. Now, Jerri, you are killing it with your podcast, and you've been going for what, about 4 years? Has it been that long?
Oh no, this month it's 8.
Holy cow! I
started in January of 2016.
Now, was it a slow burn, or did it happen pretty quick, or what did that look like?
I am telling you, at the time, when you've heard about on Apple Podcasts, they had the new and noteworthy.
Yes.
Well, back 8 years ago, it really worked. And 3 episodes in, I got an email from somebody saying, congratulations on being #1 in new and noteworthy on the general, not just under true crime, but on the general.
Huge. Yeah.
And immediately I went from a couple of hundred to 5,000, and it's grown ever since.
Good for you.
So I was just really lucky that somebody of course, it was iTunes at the time they called
Mhm.
it. Somebody at iTunes saw it, liked it, and promoted it. And so I was on their homepage and it just took off from there. It actually got like 25,000 downloads.
Damn.
But eventually, within, a month or two, it went down to 5,000, but I was
Yeah.
able to keep those and expand on that, since then. So
So
I was very lucky.
what's
I
your
was it was
word?
luck.
What are your words of wisdom to somebody that's thinking about getting into podcasting? And yeah, what are your words of wisdom, both of you guys, for somebody who's thinking about getting into podcasting? How do you get that success going? And what
Niche. Know your niche. I mean,
Okay.
Matt has a great niche.
Yeah.
I think I have a great niche. I only interview retired agents. Matt basically interviews criminals.
Yeah, it's
So
about
our show is
95%.
different than any other true crime show.
Yeah.
And even mine, I don't interview, like, it's almost never it's never really prison stories. It's very unique criminals.
Okay.
So very seldomly do I do, the mundane average kind of guy. Usually these guys have a good story. Usually, not always.
Yeah.
Sometimes for a week, the bar's low, but I try.
Okay. Well, I've got a couple of Facebook questions from my Facebook group, Cops and Writers. Let's see here. Flea Nelson Smith. Sound really interesting.
Is there any way we can, I have a call. I didn't think this was going to go this long.
Okay.
Is there any way we can, I don't know, do you want to give me 10 minutes or what do you want to do?
Well, what do you think, Jerry?
I'm fine. I'm good all day. I'm here.
Yeah,
Can
I
you-
can
I,
put it on
I got
pause
to
for
work
10
out.
minutes.
I haven't
That's
worked
fine.
out yet.
Yeah, I have to take the pooch outside for a walk, but then I do my day. But yeah.
Well, what do you want to do? Because I do have.
All right, we do have some Facebook questions from the Cops and Writers Facebook group. Flea Nelson Smith. Who says crime doesn't pay? What kind of mindset does a man have when he keeps on until caught? Is it conceit, game player? He's obviously very intelligent, so why crime instead of investing his talent in ways that benefit society? What things did he tell himself that it was okay?
I
So I
mean,
guess the rationalization thing, I guess, is what we're looking at.
yeah, I think it's just, feel like we kind of answer that when we were talking about arrogance. Just arrogance. And I just thought I was not going to get caught. And I also didn't realize the amount of time that I was looking at, especially after the first time I got caught, and it was just a slap on the hand.
Right.
So I really, it almost emboldened me because I felt like this is not, like I can easily get away with it. And two, if they catch me, and even when they caught me, they only caught me for like one of many, many things I was doing. So I thought you can limit your exposure. And I just thought I was so smart. And honestly, listen, they say fraud doesn't pay and or crime doesn't pay. And unless ultimately you're right, it doesn't. But at the time it paid really good,
Gotcha.
So at the time I could work and maybe eventually turn my hard work into a legitimate career, maybe, but I can do this immediately and make a ton of money immediately. And that felt like it was worth it to me because I wasn't thinking about the consequences.
Did you ever tally up how much money you actually made off of all this?
No, because I don't think it was, I mean, have I ever? No, I never really have really thought about it. Part of the problem is basic accounting principles. No, is that, a lot of the money goes back into more fraud.
Okay. Gotcha.
And a lot of that money that you might get $1 million, but you paid so-and-so 50 and this guy got 200 and, and then you're buying stuff with it. And that doesn't feel like you're making money. It's a very different feeling when you get that kind of money.
Okay.
Than it is when you're working for it and it's legitimately yours.
All right. Gotcha. Christopher Kratchman, what was life like in federal prison? We talked about that. Which federal prisons did you go to?
I was in, I went through processing centers, which was like in Oklahoma. And it's actually a prison that's connected to the airport. It's actually like on the airport. The airplane lands. Yeah, it lands, and they have like an arm that connects directly to the airplane. You walk out straight into the prison. I mean, it is
Wow.
It's insane. It's amazing. You like, I'm surprised that something like this hasn't been, they always do kind of like the Con Air kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
This is actually a much more Orwellian type of situation. Like, you have no idea the mass and the amount of money that is dumped into corrections. And so, yeah, you land, the arm hits the plane, you walk out, they've got tons of COs taking the shackles and chains off of you. You're placed in one room, then another, you're sorted very quickly, you're given a bologna sandwich, you're sent directly to your pod, put in your cell. I mean, it's a quick process, and they are so overwhelmingly efficient. It is insane. But so I've been there. I've been to a bunch of little tiny jails, or marshal holdovers that are inside of the local jail. So I've been to several different jails, but the main ones I've been to is I was held in Atlanta at the holdover center several times, but the main ones were the medium security prison in Coleman, the Coleman Institute or Coleman facility. And so it was the medium and the low. The bulk of my time was spent at the low, 9 years in the low.
Okay. All righty. And Richard Rybecki asks, was it worth it?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. I can't stand it when these guys give that response with, oh yeah, it made me the man I am today. And the man I am today is 54 years old, starting his life over. I got a kid that doesn't talk to me. My father died in prison. And the best thing about the whole thing is that I got out just in time to spend about a year or so with my mom and hold her hand when she died. Like, I'm disgusted with myself.
All right. So
I
else?
had to stop and
Go on.
just say that is so powerful for you to say. I mean, of all the things that you've talked about, that is the most powerful for me. And I just want to commend you for realizing and being able to say that.
Well, I'm just proud that I was able to say it without crying. So,
well,
which is extremely difficult, because if I'd say anything more, they're gonna
that's why I had to stop, because it did. I got verklempt, when you said that.
Absolutely. And what I'm taking away from all of this, is you are taking 100% onus of it. You are 100%, you're not blaming this, that, the man on the moon. You hear that so often when somebody has committed a crime. Oh, it's because of X, Y, and Z, this person, that person, blah, 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 blah. And you're not doing any of that. You're like, yeah, this is 100% me, man. You did the crime, you did the time, and now you're moving on, and now you're doing some great stuff. And you should be commended for that. It's so. On that note, what else do you have in the future? What should we be looking forward to from Matt Cox?
I don't even, like the things that I'm working on. Like I work on so many little projects that never, go anywhere. So, and then you work on something else that hits and
it'll
pays
explode.
Off.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's like, what do I want to happen? I mean, I want for the true crime stories that I've written, I would love for them to be turned into documentaries or series of some kind.
Sure.
Right? Like how amazing would it be if Netflix turned one of my stories into, a series that ran for 8 years? Like that's the goal. Like, wow, that's amazing. Because what happens then is basically you end up getting many, many more series. Like, I want to be the, Dick Wolf of true crime, or the, what do you call the Ben Mesrick of, true crime, right? So you want to hope that these things get optioned, and not just optioned, because I've optioned a bunch of them, but actually turned into,
right. You want them to come to fruition, right?
Absolutely. Like, these guys that it's like I cherry picked these guys, and they're not all necessarily even likable guys. Maybe they've just got an amazing story and they're kind of jerks, but 95% of them are guys that are real anti-heroes that have amazing over the top stories that are definitely worth movies. And I would love for that to happen. But if that does not happen, I'm okay with that. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm okay with doing my podcast. I'm okay with writing stories. I'm okay with the things that I'm doing right now. I'm good with. Like, I don't need for any of those things to happen because I'm enjoying my life so much that the fact that these things have paid off and that I'm actually able to make a living, not committing crime is such a blessing that if those things don't happen, then they don't happen. I just like working on them. I sometimes I think the worst thing that could happen is that somebody's story gets, let's say the story I wrote called Bent about this credit card counterfeiter. His story gets, we've actually optioned his life, but let's say it ends up getting turned into a movie. And I go to the movies and I see my name and I watch a 2-hour movie and I walk out and I look at my wife and I go, Like I enjoyed writing that book and I've enjoyed the process of trying so much that my fear is the movie gets made and you're like, it kind of sucked. Like, and that's probably what happens. Because if you ever have watched these interviews with John Grisham or something,
Oh
they're
yeah,
always horrified by the movies.
Absolutely. They stick their Hollywood claws into your baby and they just shred it. Whatever direction, wherever it's going, you're like, that's not exactly what I wrote. You put your
No.
blood, sweat, and tears into it, and you want to present it correctly. You want to tell the story of whatever you're telling. Then all of a sudden you're you're looking at it on TV, because I've talked to a bunch of authors. They're like, it's not even close, but you almost have to resign yourself to the fact that, okay, if this is going to be made into a Netflix series or it's going to be on the big screen or whatever, it's not going to be exactly the way I wrote it. It just won't.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I realize that. And, you have to, I love the guys. Well, you have to make sure you have control of, but they're not giving,
No.
they're not dumping $40 million
No.
into a movie and
Right.
letting you make
Who's made
decisions.
0 movies.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to say, hey, I got a deal that I'm happy with, and we're going to let you guys run with it. And,
Yeah, everybody I've ever talked to that's, an author and has had a movie or TV show, really emphasizes that those are 2 or 3 different products.
Yes.
The book is the book and the movie and the TV show is that. They're different. Let it go.
Yeah, you have to. If you're lucky enough, maybe it'll be kind of sort of close. But other than that, ain't gonna happen. All right, let's start wrapping this up. This has been so much fun. Oh my gosh, I don't want it to end. Uh, big question for you, Matt. Are you ever tempted to go down this road again? If all the stars were aligned and you saw an opportunity and you would think to yourself, like, yeah, I could do this. I could get away with this. And I can make a lot of money.
I see opportunities all the time, and I'm tempted every single day. Like I would be lying if I said, "Oh no, I
Right.
don't think about." Listen, I've thought about it. Like there's not a day that goes by that I probably don't think about some kind of a fraud or, and not so much in the last couple of years, but the first couple of years I got out, there were so many times I thought, man, if I could just do this and this would never come back on me and this and this. But, in the end, like, I would love to tell you it's morality that keeps me from doing that. But the truth is, like, I can never be in front of that judge again. It's too good out here. Like, it's not a matter of like, oh, I don't want to take advantage of society and I don't want to be, it's not that. I know that's the right thing to say. That's not the truth. The truth is I cannot be in front of that judge again. I will never get back out of prison. And it is so good out here. When I hear people complain about how tough it is, how hard it is, like, you have no idea how hard your life can be. Listen, at our worst, we've got it good out here.
At the top of the show, I said, I think this is the best time to be alive. I mean, medicine is incredible. Technology is incredible. Yeah. Are there certain things that just aren't right or whatever? Yes. Can we do better? Of course we can.
Right.
But in the grand scheme of things, oh my God, we've never been softer. We've never had it better. Period.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, it's just, life is just too good. It's just too good. You know how many times somebody will cut you off and you're driving, you get upset. Like, it happens for about a fraction of a second. And then I think, you go, you're fine. You cut in front of me. I don't care. It's fine.
Right.
That wasn't a crash. It's okay. And if it was a crash, then it'd be like, it's fine. I got full coverage insurance. I'll make a call. Like, I'll miss my appointment. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. So much is not a big deal anymore.
Right. I think, like you said, you've seen the other side, you've been to the other side. And, I think about my parents. They're both Irish immigrants. It was a third world country when they were growing up. They didn't have flush toilets. They didn't have plumbing. They'd go to a well to get their water in the morning. It was a community well. My dad would ask his mom, what's for dinner tonight? Whatever you catch or kill. That's what dinner is. And then they wind up in Chicago and they think they don't have cable. We never had cable. They don't have internet. They don't have a smartphone. And they're happy as clams. They think they're the luckiest people on planet Earth. And it's like, and I look at that and there's a part of me that is grounded that way. So when my kids start acting stupid or whatever, I'm like, oh, okay, let me talk to you about grandma and grandpa for God's sakes. Yeah. Then they give me the stink eye or whatever, but so be it. That's okay. But
I was gonna say, my wife's daughter will complain about this or that. I'm like, you know what you need to do? Let's have her go for 3 months ago, donate her time to the Cancer Society, or to St. Jude's, which is right up the, let her see what real problems are.
Yeah.
Children that have cancer, or, let's take her and let's go deliver, Meals on Wheels.
Right.
You do that a few times and you start realizing, like, wow, I need to start preparing myself for retirement. I need to start buckling down. I need to stop complaining.
When I was a new cop, I was in the worst part of the city, the poorest part of the city, the most violent part of the city. I mean, you'd walk in, there'd be kids just laying on the floor of this house. There'd be like 4 or 5 kids on makeshift mattresses, cockroaches everywhere. And I would go home to my 1,000 square foot 3-bedroom ranch, and I thought it was a castle. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so effing lucky right now. And my ex-wife would be like, this sucks. I'm like, this is amazing. I mean, you don't understand how other people live. You've never lived it. You haven't seen it. It's just, I'm very thankful for everything that I've got. All right, let's wrap this up. This is, like I said, this has been so much fun. Do you want to add anything, Matt, before we say goodbye? Any final words?
No.
Okay.
I don't know. I feel good about it. I feel
all right,
like
good. I'm glad.
No,
How about you, Jerri?
I think it was a great interview. No, I'm very pleased, with how everything's turned out, and definitely the opportunity to meet Matt.
Now, Matt, if people want to find out more about you or your books or your podcasts, where do they go?
Yeah, I have my podcast it's Matthew Cox, Inside True Crime, and all my books are on Amazon. And yeah, I think that's.
Do you have a website?
I have a website. It's called Inside True Crime, and it's actually got synopses of all my stories.
Oh, cool.
And you can, like, under each story, obviously there's a button. You can click the button and it'll bring you to Amazon if you want to buy the physical book or listen to the Audible.
All right. I will put a link to that in the show notes. And Jerri, my fabulous co-host for today, where do they go to find out more about you and your podcasts and your books and all the cool stuff you're doing?
Everything is at jerriwilliams.com, and that's Jerri Williams.com.
All right. I can't thank both of you enough for being on the show today. It has been so much fun. I've never had an interview go this long before, but I tell you what, I feel like we could just keep on talking, but
we got a lot in, but there's probably a lot more we could.
I think we just scratched the surface. All right. Much luck to you, Matthew. You know what? Thank you so much for your honesty and your story. Thank you.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Appreciate you
All
having
right.
me on.
Okay.